Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about making an application plan and also navigating the UK job market as an international student. What I want to take you through is basically 6 steps. So these steps are going to be knowing the market, what you want versus what there is, making a plan, populating the plan, creating a repeatable system, and then being able to execute and maintain a pipeline, which is all really important. This is generally the place that most international students get stuck on. So if you follow these steps, these are the same steps that I've used since 2013, and it should give you an easy way to progress and also feel a reduced sense of frustration that you're applying for things that basically are not applicable to you, don't sponsor, just never reply to you. You know, these are really important steps to take. So first of all, knowing the market. If you haven't already done so, I'd suggest that you would subscribe to our free web app, which is called sponsortier2.com. So just to kind of give you an idea, this is the size of your market. So your marketplace is these 46,717 tier 2 sponsors, or what is known as worker A rating skilled worker sponsors. That's the size of your market, your target that you're looking to enter if you want to get a sponsored job in the UK. So what you then want to do is you want to specialize and refine. So you want to choose an industry. Say, for example, you wanted to work in architecture, then that would reduce the size of your target market to 881 companies, which is still quite a lot, but it's certainly a lot more manageable than 46,000 plus companies. The next thing that you want to do, so this is a list that you can kind of work through, and we'll talk about creating an application plan afterwards. What makes sponsortier2.com really cool is you just click this button and you can go and look for these companies. So Stopford, they sponsor. You could go and look at their careers, and then you could find out whether this is something that you want to work for. Never looked at this company before. So what do we have here? So they've got for EC&I engineering consultant, that's potentially a graduate role. They've got someone here for senior process development. And you can go through and just start slowly but surely working your way through the process. A civil engineering designer, a civil and structural engineer. So this is just, for example, say you wanted to work in engineering, and this is just one example of a company. The next thing that you want to do is identify a role and a target salary. Now, you might be struggling to think, well, how much should I get paid? What's a good salary for me? What's a salary that would be suitable, that wouldn't be suitable? So you can find that through something that's called SOC code, so Standard Occupational Classifier. You'll be able to access this document after the call. So you can find that here, does change over time. But say, for example, I was just to Control F, type in civil, then I can begin to look for, so building and civil engineering technicians. I know that I need to be finding a job that's paying me a minimum of a salary of £23,400. Why? Because if I'm being paid less than this, I cannot be sponsored for this role. This is really important. So say, for example, if someone said to me, oh, I really want to work in marketing, and I'd say, fine. But when we actually look it up, you'd need to be finding a marketing job that's going to pay you a minimum of £24,400. And why is this useful? Because it gets rid of a lot of roles that just will not serve you. A lot of marketing roles, for example, they're for anywhere from, you know, 12,000 to £20,000. That's no good. The only other roles are marketing and sales director. So those are the limitations that you find yourself presented with when you're trying to look at the marketplace. I'll give you an example. So we get a lot of call all the time for people who want to work as healthcare assistants. The size of that market is actually quite small. There are just 224 companies. Could a company be categorized under a different industry? Potentially, but that's still enough companies that we can start to work through. So then what we do is that we go and look at our skilled and occupational classifier. We'd look up care, and then we'd find careers advisors. So we're not interested in this. And we find here care workers and home carers. So no going rate, but the salary must be at least £20,480 a year, or £10.10 an hour. Why is that important? I mean, interestingly, a senior care worker, for some bizarre reason, is actually getting paid more, because then you can figure out whether you're actually going to get sponsored for that role. So that's a really systematic plan for working out the size of your marketplace if you work through those 3 steps. And we've just gone through that as an example. And the next step that you want to go through is what we call verifying demand. So is there actually a demand for the job that you want to do versus the jobs that are available? And I want to give you an example from a graduate perspective. So these are 3 really popular graduate programs. The Unilever Future Leaders program has 20 roles a year. The M&G graduate program has 15 roles a year. L'Oreal's graduate program has 12 roles a year versus PwC, 1,200 roles, Deloitte, 1,000 roles. Even Goldman Sachs has got 400 roles. So which company do you think is more likely to give you a job? I mean, yeah, all these companies are prestigious, they're really well known, but generally bigger companies will have more roles across more locations. And I'm going to dig into this a little bit more so you can kind of get an idea, because the whole purpose when we're making an application plan is we're trying to maximize our potential opportunities and to maximize the chances of our success. That's really what we're trying to do, i.e., is there an actual demand for the job that you want to do? This is incredibly important. So for example, I might have people contact me and they'll say, I want to be a biomedical engineer working in a research lab for GSK, AstraZeneca, or Pfizer. You're talking about potentially 10 open roles in the whole country, and the competition for that is fierce. So I tend to say, you know, when you're looking for this, are there over 50 open vacancies? Is there a good chance of success? If not, can you pivot to another role that will accept your qualification? Now, if you're an international student, most graduate positions are non-degree specific. I'll give you an example of this. So these are just some roles through Target Jobs. If you go through, you know, this is just the first one that comes up. So this is KPMG's audit graduate program. Your qualifications, you'll need to have or be on course to achieve a minimum 2-1 degree in any discipline. You'll find this with a lot of graduate roles. If you look for the eligibility and requirements and also the qualifications, your degree, to be frankly honest, is not really important. And if you're wondering what is a 2-1 and what degree is this is from your bachelor's degree, and it's probably 60% or more. In some countries, it might be 50% or more, but that's something that you can verify yourself from your home country. I mean, I generally tend to say that if you've got 60% or more in your bachelor's degree, you're golden. You really don't have anything to worry about. Some countries like China are a little bit stricter with their grading system, but again, the onus is on you to find that out, right? So is there an actual demand for the job that you want to do? If not, you need to pivot, because you're already in a situation where you know that your chances of success are less than 4%. Only 1 in 38 international students present and studying in the UK are going to get a job. So you have to put the odds in your favor as you navigate the rules of the game. That's really exciting. So some great resources for graduate schemes. If you're really struggling to find graduate schemes, so Bright Network does this. Bright Network are brilliant. They offer lots of free internships, training programs. Whether that really contributes to the success of someone getting a job is questionable, but the experience is certainly very much worthy. So if you go here, you can find out all the key dates for graduate schemes from here until the end of time. So we actually sift and sort these for our clients internally on a database. This is brilliant. I mean, really, it's all that you need. The other thing I kind of want to draw your attention to, so we tend to target what are known as the Times Top 100 employers. So these are the leading graduate employers in this past year. So this is completely free. You know, the link for this is in the document that's going to go with this recording. For example, it will tell you. So if I click on PwC, it tells you how many graduate jobs there are, about 1,200 graduate jobs. Some companies it doesn't, like if you go to Google, it's going to say no fixed quota, but it gives you a really good idea because again, we're trying to verify demand. Like if you go to if you want to work at the BBC, there's only 100 graduate jobs there. How fierce is that competition going to be? Yeah. So these are all really precious resources that really put you front and center in front of some brilliant companies and make sure that you're up to date and aware of the market. You've sized the market, you've identified your target. You know, if you're watching this and you're going for a law program, then if you take a company like Baker McKenzie, there's only 33 training contracts available every year. That very much changes the rules of the game and the rules of engagement. Because of course, if we don't know the data, if we don't know the numbers, then it's going to make it much more difficult for us to be successful. We want to take the randomness out of our applications as much as possible. So those are some really great resources to get started with. Start big and then go small. So when you're applying for companies, you really want to be hitting the biggest companies first. Why? Because they've got the largest number of roles available. Now, there are many ways that you can make that easier. You could apply for jobs outside of London. You could apply for jobs which are less popular but offer greater chance of sponsorship. Audit being a really good example. Operations, finance, sort of maybe in a graduate size, the less sexy roles. But again, is it really important that you stay in the UK or that you do a very particular job? Always remember that the more constraints, the more conditions that you put upon your applications, the harder that you're going to make it for yourself. And you're already at a disadvantage because you've got those odds which are kind of stacked against you. So this is all about maximizing your opportunities. In my experience, the four industries that really provide the greatest number of roles are professional services, financial services, technology, and investment banking. That hasn't changed. I mean, engineering as well, but you tend to need to have a specialized degree for that. And a lot of those jobs will not require you to have a specialist degree. I've got clients working at investment banks who've got humanities degrees. I've got clients who work at financial services who have linguistics degrees. I have clients working at professional services companies who have an anthropology degree. It really doesn't matter. So we must remove these made up constraints that we put on ourselves when we're trying to identify the roles that are available, because that's going to automatically massively increase our chance of success. So if we move on, make a plan. I cannot stress this enough. What gets measured gets managed, and trackers win. So there is an application plan. It was shared in the community, and the application plan simply looks at something like this, right? Something so simple can be so powerful. And I want to show you an example of this. So this is from one of our previous clients. This is an application plan that they did. Why is an application plan so important? So that you can keep track of everything that you're doing. You can keep track of all the links. You can keep track of what the status is. You can arrange it however you want to arrange it. You can make notes. You can know what are the positions that you're applying for. You can carry out some kind of basic analysis. So this candidate in particular was applying for anything that was related to data, machine learning, and kind of data engineering. So she was applying for a real broad spectrum of roles. But what she was able to do is, even simply just putting a filter on here, and it will just allow you Oh, some sort of merge. It will just allow you, you can color code it. It seems so derivative and so simple. So for example, you'd have this and you think, oh, okay, cool. This one's actually working out for me. You'd have your date somewhere and it just gives you something that you can go back and refer to. And this is really important when it comes to populating our application plan. I can almost guarantee if you're not tracking your applications, it's incredibly unlikely that you're going to be successful. Whenever I speak to people and they're systematic in their tracking, it tends to massively increase their chance of success because I'm not randomly thinking about what to do next. I know exactly when I applied somewhere, where that company is, what the title is, whether they sponsor, what the job link is, and what the stage of the application is. So simple, but it's something that so few people do. And again, this whole process is about stacking the odds in your favor. So make sure you make an application plan. Don't like Google Sheets? Fine. Use something like Notion and their job application template. It's awesome. All of this stuff is free and it's really easy to use, but do it in a way that is simple, easy, and repeatable. Otherwise, you're going to find that you're just going to lose steam. And also you're going to be unable to figure out whether what you're doing is actually working, which is another major piece of resistance for international students. They can't figure out whether what they're doing is working or isn't working, or if something worked, why did it work? So for example, if we had this and say we also had links to our application forms here or to our cover letters, and then we notice that particular cover letters work, well, then we'll reuse that style of cover letter. What about the answers to our open questions? There are so many different ways that we can slowly begin to increase our chances of success that are, yes, initially a little bit time consuming, but over the broad space of time are going to save you days, weeks, months of absolute torture. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to populate the plan. So you've made a plan, whether that be on Google Sheets or through Notion, and you want to populate that plan. Why do I say that you should choose 50 plus companies? Because that's more than enough for you to be getting through. So this example of this sort of highly conscientious client that went through with us, I think she did what, about 50 or so applications, about 55. And they did all get done. We would have gone through every single application, but this is a highly conscientious and diligent student from Oxbridge, right? So it gives you an idea. If she's having to do that, then you're probably going to have to do that. Maybe not to that number, or maybe not to this degree, but the conscientiousness is really quite important in this process. So choosing out 50 plus companies. So if we go back to our example of medical, you could go through and go, okay, cool. So here are 224 medical companies. I've got my application plan. I'm going to make a copy of this. And then I'd start to work through those companies. So I'd say, right, I'm going to do Mulberry Care Homes. This looks like this doesn't work. Let's do Concept Care Solutions. So I'm going to do Concept Care Solutions. Working for us. Complete the application form. Submit a resume. Do you drive? Do you have access to a car? Is your mandatory training up to date? Is your DBS with the updated service? What locations are you willing to work for? So I already know that we have the link. So I can put the job link in here. I can say, no, I haven't sent it. Yes, they do sponsor. And I'm not sure about the job title. And I might then turn around and say, okay, cool. I haven't got the time to do it now, but I'm going to aim to do this application on the 2nd of July. Awesome. And then I've got it there. What does that mean? When it comes to the time set aside for me to send out applications, I'm not randomly blundering around LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, CV library and everything else, applying for any job I can find. I know exactly who I've got to apply to. Right, I haven't sent that application, and repeat and repeat. If you took the time, which I would say is a single afternoon, to list out 50 companies, all of the job links, whether you sent the applications, then you're going to have more than enough material for you to start working through, where you're not going to be concerned about what everybody else is doing. You're going to have your plan of attack, your plan of action. And then the only other thing that you need to be mindful of, particularly for graduate programs, is do they sponsor? So you could go and check out Bright Network. You could go and look at Target Jobs. You know, there's plenty. And if they don't have a deadline, then you want to think that they're rolling and you want to apply as soon as possible. So you can add that on there. The next thing that we want to do is create a repeatable system. Now, this is really very important. So finding a job as an international student, I would say, is a 3 to 6 month endeavor. So when you bear that in mind, much like creating the training plan for running a marathon, or if, say, you had to lose 20 kilos in weight, it's not going to happen in a week. It's going to involve weeks and months. So with that in mind, say, for example, you went, well, I think I'm going to have to do 50 applications. I reckon that this is going to take me 6 months. So it's going to take me 24 weeks. So I'm going to try and aim to send 2 applications a week. Cool. Now you know what to do. So then how much time do you actually have? So you might turn around and say, well, takes me an hour, takes me 1 hour to do an application. If it involves everything, cover letter, essay questions. So I need 2 hours on a Saturday morning every week. Yeah. So you might, as time goes on, it might take you 15 minutes to do a simple application, or an hour, 1 hour to do a cover letter or essay style questions. Now, this may seem kind of ridiculously detailed, but it's really not. If you understand that you're going to be running a 26-mile marathon in 6 months, then you need to be organized. If you understand the difficulty of finding a job in the UK as an international student, then you need to be organized, and you need to create a repeatable system, one that is effective and efficient, because you're going to have studies and work and relationship and friendships and family and all those types of things. So once that's done, something that's also a really good idea is creating a document of repeatable answers. I'm not sure how many people do this, but it's something that I've done for a long time with people. So when you go through job applications, you'll notice that there is a lot of repetition. Have all of those answers in a document somewhere: your name, your address, your educational records, your work experience. Anything that you find comes up, just have a document that you can just copy and paste from. You'd be amazed how much time this is going to save you. And you should definitely use something like Google Drive or have a document folder on your system. I'll show you an example of this. So this is a client of ours, different client, who's done a load of different applications. So how many are here? 12, 18, 24, 30, 38 applications, holy cow. But he's got all of his applications here from, this was the stuff that he did for an Accenture, where he actually got a job, or for ACOM, or for Aon, or ARM, or Arup, but he just had one folder where he stored all his applications. So if he saw something, he thought, that was really quite similar to a question that I came across for Bank of America, then he can go, oh, what did I say for that question for Bank of America? He could refer to his answers, and in all likelihood, copy and paste a large proportion of that answer into his application form, just because he had all his all the applications he'd sent, and also his application plan stored in one place. Because again, this is about being efficient and effective with your time and managing and tracking what you're doing, right? The next step, the final step really, is just to execute. So diarize and systematize. What time, what is the minimum amount of time you can give each week to this process, and when will that be? For example, I train in martial arts, and I know that I need to set aside 6 hours a week to do that. I just need to pick when that will be. Inevitably, that means that there are decisions that need to be made for how I spend my time. Sometimes I may not be able to do all the things that I want to do, but what tends to happen is I prioritize what's the most important thing to me, and then I diarize and systematize around that. You know, in terms of what you want to use, whether you want to use Google Calendar or iCal, or it doesn't really matter, to be frankly honest. But I would diarize and systematize, and then stick a repeating event into your calendar. Why? Because when you punch up your calendar, then you can go, when your friend says, oh my God, we should do XYZ on a Saturday morning, and you go, dude, I can't. I've got to send out my applications. I might say, oh my, but this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So then you're left thinking, well, okay, I'm going to pull that and put that somewhere else, but I'm going to make a commitment to do that. A really important part about execution is just accepting that applications will fail. I find a lot of people get disheartened. My experience is, if you're sending out 2 quality applications a week, then anywhere between, I would say 1 in 6 is a really conservative estimate. You're hoping by the end that like 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 of your applications converts into an interview or an online test. But initially more will fail, and over time you will get better and better. You will find the process much faster. So for example, if you start off doing 2 applications a week, give it a month and you'll probably be doing 4 in the same amount of time, because it becomes a repeatable system that you could go through. The other thing to accept as well is that some companies say they sponsor and they don't. So you'll go through the application form. The red flag for this is, do you have the right to work? Do you have the right to work in the UK? I would say 8 times out of 10, if a company asks this question, there is a strong possibility that your application may automatically fail as soon as you submitted that. Not every time, because some companies will then ask more questions about sponsorship. Some companies may explicitly state within their applications that you need the right to work in the UK, or you need to have a certain level of security clearance, but that is something to be aware of. For those of you who are wondering and say, well, do I have the right to work in the UK? No, you don't have the right. And I'll explain this. You don't have the right to work in the UK because it means for the full, for the full duration of your contract. So it's not talking about, which is probably 2 to 3 years. So they're not talking about, do you have the right to work in the UK right now? And you'd be like, well, yeah, I'm a student and I'm on holiday. I can work 40 hours a week. Cool. They're talking about the full duration of your contract, which is 2 to 3 years from now. That's what they're talking about, just to really clear that up. I know a lot of people get really confused about it. The next thing I wanted to talk about is you need to set aside time. I would say maybe 30 minutes a week to keep on top of new vacancies. Why? Because recency is best. Ideally, the more recent the vacancy, the better the chance of getting a job. Why? Because when somebody advertises for a job, they need someone now, unless it's a big graduate scheme. So you really want to be applying for jobs that are less than 7 days, old, at best, at worst, less than 30 days old. Anything older than that, to be honest, I don't think it's going to happen, unless this is a graduate scheme. that's kind of different because they're sort of set in stone, right? So a few things I wanted to talk to you about. These are all the resources that you're really going to need. So I'm going to talk to you about using Indeed effectively. There's a document which we created. It's called "Are You Struggling to Find a Job?" that will sponsor a work visa, where we just laid out the steps to use Indeed and sponsor tier2.com. But I just want to explain something about Indeed. So for example, here, you might be looking for technology graduate in London. Click find jobs. This has just changed recently. So first of all, date posted. You notice so we've got like 2,909 jobs. So we want to sort by date. So watch the number go down. So we want to sort by posted by employer. We want to probably make sure that the job type is full-time. For date posted, last 7 days is ideal, 194 jobs. Educational level, let's say bachelor's degree. Now we're down to 43 jobs. We want them not to be remote. And then you can choose within whatever your mileage range is, 10 miles. So now all of a sudden we're down to 39 jobs from however many we started, 2,900. What we can then do, so this is, we want to, for me personally, I tend to avoid recruiters. I tend to find them to be a bit of a waste of time. Designer in residence, client solutions manager, product manager, maritime. Okay, that looks kind of interesting. So we take someone like Intelsat, go over to sponsor tier2.com, have a look here. They don't sponsor. Cool. Next. So whoever these people are, HIB Limited. Let's have a look at these just because it would be good to find someone. Nope. Let's keep going. Who else? GKR scaffolding, probably not. Kantar will sponsor, but it's a senior role. So let's have a look at Kantar. That's interesting. Oh, sorry, because I still had it on medical. Cool. Kantar Group, maybe those other guys. I wonder if HIB sponsors. Yeah, doesn't look like it. Let's try Kantar. So cool. First thing I want to do, I don't want to apply through Indeed. Because I'm already getting screened once by Indeed, by their application tracking system. So I actually want to go and hunt down the company myself. So we've got here, the Kantar Group comes up. Let's go and have a look at their website. Careers. Careers at Kantar, find a job. This is interesting, start your career. So I might type in graduate, search. 56 graduate jobs, holy cow. Country, United Kingdom, view jobs, cool. This seems, so posted yesterday, that's interesting. Let's go and have a look at this. World leading analytics company, role expectation, keeps up to date. Cool. Qualifications, upper 2-1. Additional benefit, MBA, PhD, or Masters. Proficient or fluent in native, additional benefit, European languages or Indian languages, and some other stuff. Notice it doesn't actually ask for experience. And that job was advertised yesterday. So I'd apply through Kantar. Why? Because I don't want to get screened by Indeed and then get screened by Kantar. I want to go through as few hoops as possible to get through to that. That's just one very simple example of using Indeed. There's no point, don't mistake movement for achievement. There's no point sitting there and going like, oh, I've applied for 30 jobs today for Indeed. Better that you just sent 2 quality applications direct to the employer. Do I want to send a letter to someone, to someone, to someone else? I just want to send it directly? What gives me the greatest chance of that letter being read? Yeah. Another thing that I really quite like is Student Circus. These guys are awesome. I've known them ever since they've got started. They've just kind of gone from strength to strength, really. So you can click search and you'll see that everything's here for the most recent roles. If you go to the next page, it will obscure. So it's a little bit of a spin. But what you can do is just you could say, look for jobs. You could look in a particular industry, and you can still get the first page of that. So you might see new training contract for Dentons, WSP, Bloomberg, great employer for foreign language speakers, BNP Paribas, and so on and so forth, BDO. So, and somebody is there doing all the hard work for you. The other thing, which I'm actually not that keen on, target jobs are also really good. That Bright network is fabulous. This is also really good, but again, you've got to do the hard work. So FIS, who are these guys? So again, you'd go here, FIS. Doesn't look like it. Is it these guys? Maybe. Not really sure. Another thing I tend to find is if here we are. So let's have a look, see around here. Join our team, get started. Let's find your next role. Holy cow, 2,000 jobs. Graduate. Search, 21 results. Cool. Client data management, client services associate. Nice. Travel percentage, key duties and responsibilities, what we offer you. Nice. So yeah, cool. Another nice employer. That's just, I mean, what? That took me 5 minutes. It's better to go around and be curious. And I've never heard of that company, and probably neither of you, right? So just using that, being a little bit inquisitive. Again, why wouldn't I want to apply for target jobs? Because it's just another thing to filter us through. So that's pretty much it. You want to make sure that you've got a regular pipeline. So if you're applying for 2 or 3 jobs, maybe you just want to find 2 vacancies. If you want to sign up for a bulletin, you could do that for Indeed. So what you can do here is you can set this up as an alert once you have your constraints in. So it might be all of these, and then you might turn around and say, yeah, I want to get new jobs for this particular search. Then you've just automated the process. Save your job alerts, and then they'll send that through to you every week, and you go through the same process of looking through sponsortier2.com. So that's pretty much it. That's the steps. Know your market, what you want versus what there is, make a plan, populate the plan, create a repeatable system, execute and maintain the pipeline. And that's pretty much it for the first module. Yeah. So Mario just asked about Google Alerts for jobs. So this is actually pretty simple. Google Alerts are really sweet. So it could be like finance graduate. Oh, fudge. Finance graduate jobs. So what you do here is you see here, if you ever type job into Google, then it will look for jobs near your location. So I'm in Tunbridge, if you wanted to come and stalk me. So you'll see here, this little blue box, you click 100 plus more jobs. I would definitely advise that you try to filter as much as possible. So you might look for titles, so it might only be, so can we see total numbers here? I don't think that we can. No, it might not show. because this looks like a whole load of, so employer. So for example, employer, I would start to think about picking out people you want to work. So like Robert Half, any recruiters, I would discount. Company type. So I might say consulting, finance. I don't want staffing companies. Type, full-time. Date posted within the past week. Locations, to set your location. Title, not so relevant. I wonder if they've got any other. And then all you do is you just do this. Whoop, manage these alerts in the tab at the top. But actually you just go. So I'm pretty sure that when you go to alerts, then you'll have this, and then it will just send you alerts every day. It's as simple as that, man. Google Alerts. So I don't tend to use them so much because I found that I couldn't initiate as tight a search as I wanted to, if I'm being honest with you. I don't use them anymore. I tend to use Indeed, and also Jazz is really good at using Indeed. So we don't tend to use it. You can use it, but it tended to give too many options. And I find too much information is actually really not that helpful because it makes me feel overwhelmed. So I don't tend to use that, but that's pretty much how you use Google Alerts. Is that what you were thinking about, Mario, or was there anything extra that you wanted me to add? Oh, cool, thanks, he says. You're welcome, dude. Let's get started. So we're going to be talking about CVs today. All things CVs. There were sort of 5 things that I kind of wanted to cover. And today is a really good opportunity to do those things in depth. What your CV looks like doesn't matter. Beating the application robots, CV and jobs plus job specification equals happiness, an easy template to follow, and different CVs for different roles. So if you look up a CV in Google, you'll see all these different types of CVs like Jessica Smith, or should my CV look like this, or should it look like this, and all these different templates. I've got to admit, I find a lot of the templates to be more style than substance. So I've never used a CV template. I've never bought a CV template before because I just find them to be not very useful. Like you'll get CV templates that look like this. And the truth is that this is really not a very helpful CV. The reason being is because it can't be parsed. So almost all companies like LinkedIn, Indeed, are going to use some form of application tracking system. So what that means is, say you went to LinkedIn, right? And you looked for a job. So we're going to do this now. Job. So jobs, here we go. Project management advisor, blah, blah, blah. And it will say click apply, continue. And it takes you through this. So you can log in, apply. So this is directly through the company. Now, if you look up here, it says thebrook.tal.net. This is from a system that's called Talio. So this is Talio, ATS, which is an application tracking system designed by Oracle. I would say pretty much almost all Fortune 500 companies use Talio. So this is called an application tracking system. And what it does is that it parses your CV, i.e. there's an algorithm which will scan your CV and say, and give it a score. So it looks a little something like this. We're going to come back to this momentarily. This gives you a completely different idea of what a CV is like. Gives you a score. For your CV, it's like this CV scores 51, the CV scores 70. We want CVs that score more than 80 out of 100. And I'm going to come back to this and explain this all because it will completely change your view about what makes a good CV and what doesn't. So what your CV looks like makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. So here's an example CV of something that we would have done for a client. It couldn't be blander. You know, there's no flashy designs, there's no headers, no footers, no pictures, no nothing, right? But that CV will have a really high chance of success. And the only alterations that will be made will be based upon the skills. So we always try to, this wasn't completed, the candidate needed to fill them out. So it was for the key skills that needed to get sifted and sorted. So there's a few things to point out about this. The algorithm will pass for these things in this order. So this is really important in terms of weighting. So first name, last name, email, and phone. If your contact details aren't correct, it just won't bother. So for example, if you had like abc@hotmail, it would just go, that's not a real email address, and it would just automatically strike off your application. Or you put a mobile number in, which isn't a British mobile number, it's just going to strike off your application, which is why we always say don't put foreign numbers in. The other thing to think about is city and postcode, which is why you need to be in the UK to apply for a job in the UK. So what a lot of companies are going to do is they're going to say, we're looking for applicants that have a postcode which is listed within 25 miles of our office in Birmingham. So if you're based in London, it will automatically reject you based upon city and postcode. So that's important. You don't need to put in your full address. Current position at current company is not so applicable for graduates. This is more for professionals. But what's important to bear in mind is, say, for example, you're applying for an audit position at PwC, some mention of audit, if you have it, would be really very helpful, because that's what they're going to be looking for, right? So for the job that you're applying to, some mention of that job would be super helpful. And I'm going to go into sort of talking about how you can beat the robots and the things that you can do afterwards. Next, it's going to pass for skills. So the ATS will look for very specific skills which are most likely to be found within the job description you're applying for. Let me give you an example. So for example, this is just a random job for a business development executive, and it says you will need to be enthusiastic and ambitious, self-motivated, well-organized and adaptable, clear and concise communicator verbally and in writing, high achiever, ability to work under pressure and under own initiative when required. So if that went for an application tracking system, they're going to look for those words: enthusiastic, ambitious, self-motivated, well-organized, adaptable. The closer that you match to this, and also some other things that might be mentioned within here, because it might say responsibilities, create, agree, and implement an activity plan for appropriate KPIs to drive personal sales. So it might look for KPI, it might look for sale, it might look for telephone, sales. You can see the words that are being repeated over and over again. And I'm going to explain to you about a program that you can use, which is free, so you can see how closely your CV is going to match the job description that you're applying to. Bearing in mind, this is really very simple. The closer a match your CV is to the job description, the more likely your CV will pass. It's really that simple. So the closer the match, the more likely it will pass, which is why what your CV looks like, for example, you know, well, should my photo be on the left or on the right? Or what type of photo should I have? Or what pretty header should I have? Or should I have this blue? No one cares. No one cares at all. An algorithm doesn't care. In fact, this will be detrimental, and I'll explain why later, why you actually want to avoid designs like this, and why having a super boring looking CV like this is really quite helpful. And then finally, education. So qualifications as requested in the job description. Bearing in mind, if you're applying for a financial analyst position, and so you want to think, will do any of my modules include the word finance? It's a good thing to think about. If you're applying for an accounting position, do any of my modules include accounting? So they're not really going to be that concerned about modules which aren't relevant to the job. Now you can go a little bit down the rabbit hole and sort of go like, oh, how can I get as close as much as possible? It's not that important about, and I'll show you why later on. What will be really good is if we have time, if any of you here have got your CVs, then you can send them to me and we can have a play around with it. That'd be super fun. The next thing I want to talk about is, okay, cool. So now we understand that the closer my CV matches the job description, the more likely it is that I'm going to get an interview. I'm going to get an online test. This is fairly easy to understand. And then you're not caught up in this really dangerous idea of like, what should my CV look like? Doesn't matter. So we want to talk about how to beat the application robots. Now, there are a couple of really cool, what we call CV scanners. So CV scanner. I've been through some of those. There used to be a great Israeli company, which was free, but they've gone bust. Resume Worded, I used. CV Scan, I don't particularly like. So this, for example, is through Resume Worded, and it scored the resume. This is kind of helpful, but if you want anything else that's seriously useful, you're going to have to pay, which I don't really want to do. The tool that I love is called JobScan. So what I did was I've basically taken this example CV. So I'll show you how it looks like from the start, just so you get an idea. I love JobScan. I've used it for years. It's free. You get 5 free scans afterwards. I think you have to pay. So once you kind of create your account, it can optimize your LinkedIn as well. So you'll see here, scans left 5. I think you get 5 free scans a month. And then you just go plus scan, which takes you to this page. So if you go and have a look here, what I did was I just uploaded this example resume, which was from an old client. And then I know that we helped him to apply for like business development type roles. So I took this job description just randomly, it was just the first one that come up, and then we can scan it. So we press scan, and it's going to tell you how closely matching these two things are. This is super cool, right? So it's basically saying this is a 24% match, which is really poor. JobScan will ask for an 80% match. It's not necessary, and you can drive yourself completely mental trying to get an 80%. I find 50% is fine. So when you go through here, it will say, so it's saying add, so there's no job title match. We recommend having the exact title of the job. Let's have a look. What else is here? This is interesting. Skills match. This is something super cool, right? So it'll say to you, in the job description, it mentions business sales 3 times, and you didn't mention it at all. It mentioned marketing twice, and you didn't mention it at all. It mentioned field sales. So then all of a sudden, you know, in your example CV, and this will be in the breakdown. So you just say key skills, business sales, marketing, and whatever. It is a little bit more sophisticated than that, but really not that much more sophisticated, to be frankly honest with you, because I've played around with this loads. This is really weird. Why is this? Seems like it's not having a very good day. Okay, cool. So that'll be other thing. Highlighted skills, so it actually highlights where it picks the skills out. Bearing in mind, this is all free. Formatting, something to fix. So it says upgrade now. I wouldn't bother. Searching, so job title match, but the education matches. This job doesn't specify a degree. There's a work experience section, an education section. The dates in your work experience are properly formatted. You are using a PDF resume. So this is an important thing to note. If you learn nothing else, never upload a CV as a Word document or anything else apart from a PDF. This file doesn't contain special characters that could cause an error in ATS, and your file name is concise and readable. Ideally, your file name should be first name, last name, CV. The reason being is if you have CVs like this, which will go through optical character recognition. So what OCR will do is it will literally just read line by line. So it would just read like Fairburn GA summary statement 555 focused life research with blah blah, and it will just read line by line. So never have your CV in columns. It's a really bad mistake. And I find a lot of people, when they come to me and they'll say, oh, no one's accepting my CV, they have this kind of style. Like, this is a free downloadable CV template. Stay away from this. It's not very good. Again, This shows no understanding for optical character recognition. So it's going to read Scott Perez, contact, professional statement, address, helpful professor, blah, 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 phone. It's just going to read it line by line because it's a computer. It's not a human that's looking at your CV. So yeah, JobScan is awesome. I highly recommend that you use it, and it's free. The other thing is, so have similar job titles in your CV if you can. If not, put that in your job description. Try to list as many keywords as you can which relate to the desired tasks or skills. So like I said before, all my notes are going to be available when I upload the recording. This was awesome. So I found this really cool thing for a CV scan. So say you're applying for like an accountancy job, and then say we want to be an audit trainee. And then it shows you what are the best audit trainee skills list in the accountancy industry, because it's constantly passing job description CVs. So it'd be like ACA, audit trainee, assurance, top 10, external audit, work life, and some other things. And then you can export this as a CSV. So then you can put this into, say, if we click this, grab it, and then we literally have a skills list, which I thought was really, really cool. I love geeking out about all that stuff. Aim for at least 400 plus words in your CV. Try to have measurable results. So this is really important. When this might not be applicable to everyone. So for example, this is from like an experienced candidate, but he put, I've got multiple years experience working at a company generating sales. So I was like, well, how much did you sell? If you worked in a restaurant, how many people did you serve? How long did you work for? Try and put a number that gives me an idea, some kind of comparable. So it's like if somebody, I always give this example, someone says like, I saw a big dog. I'll say, well, how big was the dog? And they'll kind of like hold out their hands. It's like, oh, it's this big, or they'll like stretch their arms out, or it depends. Everybody has got a different conception. But if you turn around and say, the dog was like a meter tall and it weighed 50 kilos, I'd be like, wow, that's a big dog. So when you give numbers, when you give data, it really helps to give me a clear idea about what you're talking about. No formatting, save as a PDF. I just like bold titles and headings to make stuff stand out. So I may pick these out, like 20 plus client relationships. I just like using bold. It's a really simple writing trick because it just makes stuff jump off the page. That's all it is. Because if and when probably a human at some point is going to read this, though not until like the second interview or the final interview. So it just makes it a little bit easier to read and make stuff jump off of the page. And try and check and match the hard and soft skills in JobScan to get as close a match as possible. So if we go back here, like what I would do is I try and match as many of these skills as I can. So like sales target, sales reporting, advertisement, like social media, brackets, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Again, I just want to get as close a match as possible. That's really all I'm trying to do. The only thing that you don't want to do is what we call keyword stuffing. So that's where basically just all the way down at the bottom of the page. Say, for example, in your CV, you just write out like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, like the ATS is now a little bit more intelligent than that, just much like Google search is more intelligent and more wise to keyword stuffing. So it has to be contained in a sentence somewhere. That's the only thing to kind of bear in mind with that. The other thing that you can do is mention things multiple times. So if you take, for example, this CV, which again is just made up. So this person is applying for finance. So he mentions finance manager, key financial accounts. They want you to talk about cash flow, exceeding targets, presenting key data. Again, he mentions financial manager, budgets, forecast, that type of thing. So you can layer it in. And to be honest, once you've done this for one job, for one type of role, you don't need to keep doing it over and over. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. if you're kind of really struggling, if you're like, yeah, but Mike, I don't know what skills I need for the job, and I'm not really sure how to find that stuff out, just use Prospects. Prospects is awesome. I use this all the time. So if you look up a job description like audit associate Prospects, and it will give you external auditor job profile. It's so easy to use. You see here, it'll be like skills, and it just lists all the skills that you need for the job, or the qualifications that you're going to need. Prospects is by far and away the most useful kind of skillsy description type website that I've ever found for different jobs. And I think they've got 400 different job descriptions on there. So if you don't know where to start or what to refer to, I would start here. I find this to be super useful. So all you do is you've got your CV, and then you just think, right, well, I need to add in these skills. So I'd add in interpersonal. So skills, key skills, which I've got here. And I've also got on an example that I'm going to show you in a little bit. I'd be like, right, so I need interpersonal skills, influencing skills, written communication, verbal communication, commercial acumen, and so on and so forth. You could even just do something as simple as just going, I would just get up. I always like to have like templates, it just comes from writing. So I could go like interpersonal, influencing, building relationships, negotiating with clients. And I would just carry on doing that and just list out all the skills. Now, you don't have to include them all, but you know, for example, it's got like data analytics, modeling tools, and so on and so forth, right? And then you've just got a whole list of skills that you want to try and fit into your CV somewhere. Again, you don't need to fit in all of them. I'd say maybe 7 or 8, that's good enough. And then if you're unsure, then you can just take the job description, say for the audit role that you're applying to, take your CV, plug it into JobScan. No worries, you'd be golden, right? So an easy template to follow, we've got this. This is actually already in the circle. So it's been designed up a little bit differently, but this is an easy template for you to follow. Name, contact details, education. So we like having our CVs looking something a little bit like this. So you've got name, mobile, city and postcode, email, education. You'll notice I don't list all the modules. I just list modules that are relevant. A really common mistake that people make is that they leave their grade for their degree off. So if a job description is looking for a 2-1, then it's going to be looking for this. So sometimes people do weird stuff that like they'll put upper second class. Again, an OCR, like an algorithm, doesn't understand what that means. But if you just put 2-1, then they're going to go, oh, 2-1 tick. You know, put 5% on for matching for the job description. And then with the employment history, so you'd list out the bullet points of what you've done. Sorry, for some reason this is misformatted. And then you start layering in those key skills for the job description and so on and so forth. You list them out in chronological order. A school teaching assistant, you can put this in for extracurricular activities, and also you can layer this in for skills and interests. So, you know, for example, a particular type of coding language or Microsoft Office, they might ask for Excel. Whatever it is, whatever you find in the job description, you can just go back and forth with your CV and just make those adjustments. And if you're unsure, just scan them through JobScan. And again, we're looking for like a 50% match rate. That's kind of good enough. Doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. So finally, all you need to do for changes for your CV. So a lot of people are like, oh, do I need to do a different CV for a different company and for a different this? No, you just need a different CV for each role. Most people are just going to be applying for very similar roles. They might apply for audit roles, finance roles, operation roles. biomedical roles, legal roles, whatever it is, it's all pretty similar. So anytime you come across a new type of role, then you just save that as like your legal template or your accounting template or so on and so forth. Just a few things to kind of note at the end. CVs should never be more than 2 pages. If it's more than 2 pages, you're saying too much. Arrange in chronological order. I like size 12 font or bigger. I find size 10 and below, you can't read it by the naked eye. Well, I can't read it anyway. It makes me squint. And anything that makes me kind of resist or uncomfortable is something that I'm gonna kind of go, oh no, it's too small. I can't read it. You'd be surprised how simple it can be to just get rejected, particularly once your CV will eventually get in front of a person. And finally, as I've kind of reiterated quite a few times, just avoid designs at all costs. Avoid templates. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than this. And I've used this template for 9 years. I've never changed it, and I always get a really good hit rate with our clients. People want to think that it needs to be sexier to be different, and it really doesn't, because all we care about is that the OCR, the optical character recognition within the algorithm, is going to match up the CV to the job description. And it's just going to go, okay, cool. I give you a score of 75, proceed. Proceed through to online tests, proceed through to interviews, whatever that may be. And I guess that's pretty much it for sort of getting stuff tweaked for CVs. So I'm going to leave it there. Hi guys, today we're going to be doing module 3, which is finding vacancies that sponsor. This for me is probably the most important skill to have, apart from general communication skills, which we use all the time, whether it's sending emails, doing interviews, presentations, group discussions, that kind of thing. Just because finding a job, much like generating business, is all about having a strong pipeline. So we need to have a consistent source of opportunities that we can act upon all the time, because opportunities change, what's available to us may change, and we need to always be on top of the most relevant opportunities, the newest opportunities, so that we can really take advantage of this, because otherwise we kind of find ourselves constantly stopping and starting all the time, or we'll find that we're waiting for a job to come back to us and they don't come back to us. A lot of times what students will do is they'll kind of have their heart set on a couple of companies, they won't get any response, and they just basically stand still. And by the time you're able to move on with that, or you're I suppose move on isn't the right word. By the time you have a response, it might be too late. You might have run out of time, you might have run out of money. So you want to be constantly generating pipeline, and this is what this module is all about. So let's jump into it. This does expand on session 1 in terms of outlining a clear and repeatable strategy. It's something that I've consistently found is really why, one of the main reasons why, premium clients will pay us, is because we provide a clear and repeatable strategy for generating vacancies. So we're really going to sort of go through this step by step. The first thing, and it always comes back to this, which is that trackers are winners, is just to make sure that you have an application plan. So you would have been able to access a copy of this. It's probably going to be somewhere down in the notes for the course. And it's just about sitting there and writing out those 50 companies. It could be PwC, KPMG, etc., etc. You might even just take the list from here, which are Times Top 100 Tier 2 sponsors. So you might just literally just take this list, copy and paste it, put it into here, and then you've got yourself a list of companies. You want to go through and sort of think about what's the job titles that you're applying for. Now, the reason why we do this is because this is all about task switching, and task switching is so important, because generally what people will do is that they'll go, oh my God, I need to find a job. And then they'll be randomly looking around Indeed or LinkedIn or one of the other job platforms, and they'll just waste hours and hours of time because they don't really know what they're looking for. If you have an application plan that you can return to, it just saves you so much time. It's really easy for you to track. You can see, you know, what applications do I need to send? Is there a particular deadline I need to go through? Did I have an interview somewhere which I'm waiting to hear back from? All of those little things which are so important, particularly if you have a really busy life, because you're just going to forget. Trackers are winners, and if you're kind of keeping a record of what you're doing, it's just going to make your life so much easier over time. So if you don't already have an application plan, you should have one, and you should really have kind of 40 to 50 companies here. You really want to stretch yourself. It's so important. It will take you an afternoon, but I guarantee you it will probably save weeks off your job search if you have an application plan. So that's where to get started. The next thing you might want to do is you might want to make 2 lists, which is what I want and what there is. So what I want could be a variety of things. For example, today I was talking to somebody who said, I really want to work in the NGO and charity sector. And I said, oh, that's fantastic. But there are probably no jobs there. And I can really highlight this through this list. So if we go through these, so these are Times Top 100 Tier 2 sponsors. These are the biggest companies in the UK. We haven't actually updated this for 2022. So you can see PwC is at the top, has got about 1,350 graduate jobs. I estimate 10 to 20% of those are earmarked for sponsorship. That's just an estimate based upon my experience, but it seems to be reasonably accurate. HSBC and so on and so forth. And if we go all the way down the list, where can we find any charity or NGOs that sponsor? We can't, because there aren't any, right? That might have just, same for example, if you're applying for media or oil and energy or retail. Now, the fact of the matter is, a lot of times we want to take an evidence or data-based approach when we're trying to outline a strategy. We don't want to do an anecdotal approach, which is basically, my friend said that he got a job at blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, that's useless. It's like someone sharing with me that they read a story on Facebook and then I just stopped listening. So if we look through this, the only place where it's slightly misleading is with technology. That's the only place where I feel like there is a lot more sponsorship available than what's reflected in the Times Top 100 list. But if you look through this, you can kind of see where the lion's share of jobs is. Just across accounting and professional services, there are 5,000 jobs. So anywhere between 500 to, I would say, 1,000 sponsorship certificates of sponsorships are up for grabs. That makes it a much more palatable option. Same if you look across banking and finance. Chemicals and pharmaceuticals, you come across a lot of people who want to work in biochemistry. Again, you know, they're limited access. It doesn't mean there aren't opportunities out there, but use the data, do your research, and make sure that you have a really clear strategy in place before you kind of wander off and start applying for jobs. And that's something you could do in your application plan. You could just start another tab. So you could say, you know, what there is and what I want, for example. That's a good way of approaching it. The next thing you want to do is use, so this then comes down to generating, these last 3 steps are really about generating pipeline. So these first 3 steps are kind of identifying what there is. And these last 4 steps are all about generating pipeline. Another really cool trick, which not a lot of people use, and I've got absolutely no idea why, is a template for your personal details. So just literally, because you're going to repeat this over and over again. So you could just grab your CV. So I've just got an example here. So it could be like, oh, this is my master's. This is my bachelor's. Because you're going to get asked these questions over and over again. And again, it's about task switching and saving yourself time. So if you do something like this, and you have a simple application template where every time you come across a new question, you just save it into the template. Now, this is a very simple idea, but it will really revolutionize how quickly you're able to submit applications. Because very often, you know, I can work with clients who might struggle to send out 1 decent application a week, and then they'll be sending out 10 a week. And they'll be good applications, and they'll be getting responses from half of those companies for online tests, for interviews. And the reason being is they've made it a really easy and repeatable process. Like, you know that you're going to get asked over and over again for A levels, equivalent grades, GCSE, work experience, university degrees. You might be asked for your modules, you might not. I just find this to be a really simple idea, but I've never heard anyone else talk about it. I'm not really sure why, if I'm honest, but it's something that I recommend that people do, just having a simple job application template so that you can have a repeatable system that you can use over and over again. I think that's a super cool idea, and it's definitely it's gonna. I say it will 2 or 3x the speed at which you can send out applications in the same amount of time. So what I kind of wanted to go through, really in some detail actually, is talking about the plan. So the plan for generating pipeline and for generating regular vacancies. So you've got your list that you're working through, your 40 or 50 company list, but some of them may not have open applications. Some of the deadlines might be very far away. Some of them, may not have roles that you're particularly interested in. So at any given time, you might be applying for, say, 2 companies off your list, and then you're looking to submit another 2 applications a week, for example. So step 1 for this is once a week, I would set aside 30 minutes to find new vacancies. There should be dedicated regular time that you repeat over and over again. So for example, with our clients, that's exactly what we do. So a member of our team, Jazz, will sit down, she'll sift and sort through all the vacancies, and then she'll send those out to all of our clients. Takes her about half an hour. The more you do something, the faster that you'll get, right? The reason being is a really important thing to remember is applying early is literally one of the best ways to increase your chance of getting a job. That's got nothing to do with you being an international student or not. It's just to do with the fact that it's just basic economics. Apart from if you're talking about a Times Top 100 company, which has a graduate program, even then, if you've got more than enough, if you know exactly when Newton Europe's graduate consulting program is going to open, on day 1, you want to be looking and applying for that job. Why? Because if you imagine, you might have, so day one opens 100 spots, 100 people apply. Say, for example, probably basic maths, 10% get through. That tends to be sort of a good average, like 1 in 8, 1 in 10. So by the time that you get to day 7, 90 spots are left. Rinse and repeat that over and over again. Say every time 10% of people are getting through, then you're going to get day 14, 81 spots left. Day 21, 73 spots left. Day 28, 66 spots left. Oh, sorry about that. 66 spots left, right? All the time that this is happening, more and more people are becoming aware of this opportunity. More people know about this job. Every week, say that increases, that doubles every week. So then by day 7, 200 people apply. Then 400 people apply. Then 800 people apply. And so on and so forth, right? So actually it's significantly less. So actually, if that's 10%, if 10% are getting through each time, then by the time that we get to day 14, there are actually 70 spots left. By the time we get to day 21, there are 30 spots left. And by the time we get to day 28, filled. So being early is advantageous for 2 reasons. Number 1, there are the maximum number of spots available. Number 2, there are the minimum number of people applying, and therefore you have reduced competition. Being early is more than half the battle. It is, I would say, the majority of the battle. So you want to apply only through company sites, not through Indeed or LinkedIn. I went through this in module 1, but it's really simple. If you apply through LinkedIn or Indeed, you have a filter, right? Indeed, LinkedIn, ATS. And then you have filter to company. So really, you want as few filters as possible, and you want the closest distance from A to B. So you apply through the company directly. You work for your existing plan plus new vacancies. And I want to talk about each of these in turn. So first of all, we've already put this handout out, which is 5. Are you struggling to find a job that will sponsor a work visa? Using Indeed, we put a video out about it as well. I'll be sure to link that in. Here's Indeed, right? Most people use Indeed. It's the biggest job website in the UK. So first of all, a lot of people do stuff like this. They'll search for like graduate job and they'll say London. Let's see what we come up with. So 5,052 jobs. Okay, that's not particularly helpful. So first of all, we always want to be as refined with our search as possible. So graduate plus finance. So we want it in our general location. So we're based in Tunbridge. Find jobs. So 5,000 becomes 17. Right, so there's not a lot of jobs local to Tunbridge. Let's extend the range. Cool. So we've got 316 jobs. The first thing that we want to do is I tend to sift and sort within the last 7 days down to 52 jobs. I only want jobs that have been posted by employers down to 27 jobs. I want to make sure that these are full-time jobs down to 21 jobs. You might think, oh, but that's not a lot of opportunity. Realistically, how many jobs can you apply for at one time in any given week? 5, maybe 10. And we're talking about high quality applications, not, just one-click apply applications. Then what we do is, so we go through each of these in turn. So this is, NHS doesn't seem to be quite good. I always read the job description, just have a quick look through. I shared about this at the bottom. Generally, so this looks a little bit complicated. Yeah. I'm basically looking for anywhere that they say work, right. So the right to work straight away. Because if I need the right to work, then I don't want to, before you continue, nope, don't want to do that. So that just seems unduly complicated. I literally just move on immediately. So let's go to the next one, which is Royal Bank of Canada. Full job description, graduate risk analyst, all the way down to the bottom. I can't see any way that it's mentioning the right to work. So then I will double check freesponsortier2.com. Royal Bank of Canada. Cool. So they're a sponsor. This is also really cool because I can just go and look at their website directly. Let's see if I can easily find careers. Careers. Work at Royal Bank of Canada. Browse by interest. This looks unduly complicated. Let's go back to Indeed. Apply on company site. Oh gosh, this is so annoying. Cool. Continue to application. Nice. So Indeed will do this relatively often. So they'll just allow you to apply directly through the company, but you always want to start off and make sure. I tend to do one last check. So right to work or anything about work. Let's see what comes up here. Or visa. Nothing. Cool. So got a good vacancy, right? So you take this, you plug this into your application plan. So you put Royal Bank of Canada. Oh. Risk analyst. Yes. Job link, no. So maybe you continue, right? So you go back here and then we look at the next one. So Rothschild. So who are these guys? Coulter Elite. So you'll see it says easily apply for this job, which I personally don't really want to do. But when we're looking here, it says graduate IT support analyst, right? So that's not quite got the right search for me. Full-time permanent position. So it's just an independent recruitment consultancy. So instantly my mind just kind of switches off. How about Byte software, training, key responsibilities, reliably commute, or so it needs to be in Leatherhead. Okay, hiring 3 candidates for this role. That's interesting. So let's look up these guys. Cool. So they're hiring. You can Google through, have a look at careers. Nice. It's like a nice little firm, current vacancies. So sometimes you get a bit of a disconnect between, so they're only doing this. It looks like they're only advertising this through LinkedIn for some reason. So maybe this would be one of the rare occasions when you would apply through LinkedIn. And that's pretty much it. I mean, how long did that take me? 5 minutes to find 2 vacancies. So I would say once you get into the habit of it, if you were doing that for, and I said set aside 30 minutes. So you can easily go through and find, I would say 3 to 4 good vacancies, less than 7 days old, within 20 minutes, in all honesty. So then you want to prioritize by recency and deadline. Always read the job description to save waste of time. The only company I know which will specify whether you need a right to work based upon the job itself is PwC. So this is for, we'll have a look here. Graduate, there we go, graduate audit Reading, spring 2023. So PwC specifically has a page where it talks about whether people need a work permit or not. But this is really rare. They're the only company that I know that does this actually. So you see here it lists them out, but actually it's able to sponsor people for quite a lot of roles. So just for Northern Ireland audit, tax, but it's all right for London, Milton Keynes, Reading, Watford. It's pretty handy actually. And it just outlines the stuff that you need, which is cool. Sometimes companies will only ask if you have the right to work in the UK in the application form, which is super annoying because you've spent all this time filling out an application form and then right at the very end, they'll be like, oh, do you have the right to work in the UK? And you're like, oh. My advice there is just submit a dummy application. Just tell the truth. You don't have the right to work in the UK. Submit a dummy application. And if it gets rejected, then you can just try again with a different email. Finally, I always recommend quality over quantity. A good rule of thumb is about 2 to 4 applications per week. I would say that is a pretty good goal. And that's pretty much a bulletproof way for finding vacancies and generating pipeline for vacancies that are sponsored on a week by week basis. I would say if you action that, you will massively increase not only your response rate, really you want to be getting one positive response a week at least. You're submitting 4 applications, you should be getting a positive response from 1 to 2 of those applications. If you're not, either your application isn't good enough, as in it's not well thought out enough, or you're just applying for the wrong types of vacancies. So yeah, That was a little bit faster than I thought it was going to be, actually. But I thought that that was an important thing just to specify and to concentrate on. So I wanted to talk as well about doing a personal introduction. This is the first thing that we get our clients to do. So when they join us, the first thing that they'll work on is the answer to this question, tell me about yourself, which might seem a little bit strange why we do that. I've done this for years. The reason being is, if you've got a really good personal introduction, it sets a great foundation for everything, for answering any interview questions, for selling yourself to do different competency questions. It's probably one of the first questions you're going to get asked time and time again. If you can nail a really good personal introduction, it will make a massive difference. And also, this is a game of psychology and a game of confidence. If you can introduce yourself really well, you'll make a really good first impression. And also, you'll feel awesome. If you can kind of go into an interview and nail it, do your tell me about yourself speech for 2 minutes. And why is this important? Most of the time, when an interviewer gets on a call with you, slightly different for a video interview, but at some point you will have to introduce yourself to a human who's going to hire you, is that what a lot of graduates and candidates don't realize is that whenever I interview for a role at my business, I might have interviewed 9 people in the same day. I'm so bored. Like, I'm so bored of interviewing people and speaking to people and asking the same question. And also I'm super busy. So I might have been like jumping from client to a bit of writing to something else, something else, something else. So when I get there, my first question is generally like, tell me a little bit about yourself. Why? Because I can't, I'm literally looking at your CV at the same time as I'm talking to you. I've kind of forgotten who you are, which is really harsh to say, but is the people generally who you're speaking to are busy. And we can break this down into 7 steps. I always like answers that are about 2 minutes long when spoken, which is about 200 words. That's kind of the sweet spot. So I've messed around with the numbers over the years, but I find that 2 minutes, you're pretty much golden. It's really rare that you'll have less than 2 minutes to answer a question. And it's pretty rare that you'll have more than 3 minutes to answer. And I always say, if you can, say less. Say less, be clear, be concise, and be understood, which is really important in communication. A lot of people want to use long words, long sentences, and really, you just want to be understood. So you can follow this through in 7 steps. And this is a good way to look at it, which is, what are you doing? It's almost kind of like time travel. It's like the present, the past, the future. What are you doing now? What have you been doing for the last 3 years, 1 year, 5 years? Moderate and adjust based upon age and experience. What do you want to do next? Work experience, voluntary, extracurricular skills and interests, and then end with a bang or curiosity hook. I actually don't include this anymore, but I still think it's pretty cool. Why? Because most people are only really going to remember the last sentence that you said to them. If you're a complete stranger, I mean, look, if I know you, if I love you, if you're somebody who I speak to, on a regular basis, then I might pay more attention to everything that you have to say. But if I've never met you before, then I'm only really going to sort of remember maybe the first and the last thing that you said. So let's go through this. So this is a good example. Like, what are you doing now? Hi, my name's Susan. I'm currently a postgrad in biochem at Dundee University. A sentence. I'm originally from China and studied chemistry at blah, where I finished blah. I won several scholarships for my academic results. The past. What do you want to do next? I'm keen to work in this company and do this role because I want to be at the cutting edge of research and develop my skills for designing and testing new drugs. Plus, I think drug design is a great way to help so many people improve their health. Now, what you'll notice is here is this is all super short. So your personal introduction will need work. Probably the first, so if you're writing a personal introduction, the first time you write it, either you won't write enough or you're going to write way too much. Now, if you're wondering what's better, it's better that you write way too much and then you can edit it down. But I provided the example because I want to give you an idea about sort of what I'd say is an ideal length. Like, really, we want to sort of get to the point, and the meat is really the work experience. That's kind of what they're looking for. If I'm hiring you to do a job, then really I want to know, like, what have you done before? Work experience. I interned at two large Chinese drug manufacturers. They mainly work in sales and marketing to help companies brand and sell their products straight to market. This was a great opportunity for me to learn how big pharma works and talk directly with clients. Also, I learned how to work and communicate as a member of a large team. Whoops. There's not a lot going on here. So literally we've just covered exactly what she did, that she got to learn to talk with clients, and that she got to work as part of a team. Where a lot of people go wrong with work experiences, they try to either describe everything that they did, or they're way too vague. So just pick out 2 or 3 key things from your work experience, ideally, that relate to the job description. That's enough, because this is just the start, the personal introduction. I haven't really asked you any interview questions. Voluntary, extracurricular. During my time in China as part of our local dance team, we won several awards in competition at our school. Again, a sentence, a talking point. I've played badminton since a young girl. I enjoy the exercising and adrenaline as well as the competitive nature of the sport. I feel regular exercise helps me to stay focused on my studies. And then end with a bang or curiosity hook. I also play the guzheng, which is an ancient Chinese plucking instrument. I'm grade 8, which kind of elicits the question, what's a guzheng? What's all that about? Just something, I like it. It's just a little bit of curiosity, something to start a conversation with somebody. You know, if someone turned around to me and said, oh, I just finished sailing the Atlantic Ocean, I'd be like, holy crap, that sounds like a story. Please tell me. So it's just something to elicit a response from your audience. And then you have the, you have in this worksheet, I love this worksheet, did it ages ago. What's your name? So what are you doing now? What's your name? What are you studying or doing, and where? Last 3 years. What were you doing before now? Another degree, secondary school, were you working? Just let me know. What do you want to do next? What company would it be? What job? What are 3 reasons why you'd love to work there? A common question I get asked for this is like, I don't know what company I want to work out. I don't know what role I want to do. That's fine. Just leave it out. You don't need to include that. It's a nice thing to have, but it's not an absolutely necessary thing to have. Work experience, your last 2 to 3 jobs in order, from most recent to least recent. A 1-sentence summary for what you did. What are the skills you learned that will help with the job that you want to do? And that's really important, that final point. Not what did you learn, or what skills do you have? It's like, what skills you learned that will help with the job you want to do. You have to match those 2 things up. You have to go through this idea that we covered in module 2 when we talked about CVs, which is some form of pattern matching. Matching up the skills and experience from the job description to your CV, to your answers. This is a common theme, a common thread that will follow throughout the whole course, because it's worth repeating over and over again. Same again, voluntary extracurricular. What do you do outside of studies and work? Anything from the past 5 years, even if it's hobby related. Just something that shows me a different side of you, whether it be volunteering, charity work, societies, clubs, just something interesting, you know, or is it just really all you do is work and study? And then finally, skills and interests, languages, IT, hobbies, anything like that. Just anything that's just something different, something that can have a conversation, something to make them go, ooh, or ask a question, which is when you end with a bang or a curiosity hook. Some things to think about with a personal introduction is, first of all, when we go through this with clients, they probably will repeat this at least 10 times. Now, when you write out your personal, first thing you want to do is write out your personal introduction script. Then you want to edit it. So I would say let it sit, maybe come back to it tomorrow. The first 3 times, so the first time you read out your script, you're going to want to time yourself. So you'll find that either you end up talking for 4 minutes or you end up talking for 90 seconds, whatever that may be. See you, buddy. And then after all, in time, you will set your constraint and you will put your time down. Also, you'll know what you need to edit out. The first 3 times, you're probably going to end up reading it out as a full script. The next 3 times, maybe you want to take your script and sort of shorten it and simplify it down to cards or just basic bullet points, or have it somewhere on a wall behind you. And the last 3 or 4 times, you want to try and go scriptless. A lot of times what people are worried about by not having a script is they think, oh my God, what if I make a mistake or miss something out? The truth is, it doesn't matter. They don't know what your script says. And it's all about delivering something with confidence rather than delivering something perfectly, but sounding like a boring robot. And if you can, you want to be spontaneous. So I would say probably within a week or two, you could be pretty fluent with your personal introduction. A good little trick is just to put copies of your script around your house, or maybe you put it on the bathroom door or on the fridge. So it just forces you just to read that out or practice that. It's just 3 minutes here, 3 minutes there. But it is a case of repetition equals mastery. The more that you practice and repeat that, the better that you'll get. But you'll find that this will have a tremendous effect when you prepare for your interviews, when you're thinking about what to talk about, because you know how to sell yourself. Doing that personal introduction, it's a really important first skill to learn, and something that I would get going as soon as you start practicing for your interviews and applying for your first job. You should be getting into the habit of doing your personal introduction. Let's talk about online tests. So these are a really crucial next stage after the application. And the first thing that you're going to be coming across, you've got your CV, your cover letter, you filled in your application form, and you send it off. And this is generally the first stage that you're going to be assessed or tested. And there's some variance in terms of how many candidates are going to get through. Just as a sort of rough guideline, only 1 in 5 will pass online tests. Most companies will make their online test as strict as possible to try and get through as many people as possible with the minimum amount of human resources and effort. So you're going to lose about 80% of the people that apply. So it's quite a crucial stage to pass. Let's go through this. There's going to be 7 parts in this training. First of all, what are online tests? So online tests, psychometric tests, they're just time tests you take to test different skills. So this number is quite a low estimate. It was put out a couple of years ago now. 75% of Times top 100 companies in the UK use psychometric testing, and about 80% of Fortune 500 companies, that number's pretty low. I would say 95% plus of companies do it. Every so often I hear about a company who hasn't tested and just went straight to online interview, but it's pretty rare. Here are 4 key ideas to really think about with online tests. Deliberate practice makes perfect. So if you want to be better at online tests, you just need to practice. It's not sexy, it's not particularly difficult to do, but it is simple in the sense that if you set a system of rigorous practice, you will get better at online tests. You just need to learn that this is part of the game. Even though you don't enjoy it, it's boring for you, it's boring for everybody. And I've been through this so many times with different clients. The second thing is that consistency is key. So setting yourself, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, about what's the sort of schedule that you should stick to, or how often should you practice, but it's going to be better for you to do 3 tests a week than 12 tests in a day. Also, you're going to feel less suicidal if you do that. So set an amount to do each week, and try to set an amount which you think is less than you can do. This is a really key idea, because again, and we will turn to this point throughout the training, which is the minimum effective dose, something that Tim Ferriss talks about in his book, The 4-Hour Work Week. But if you set less than you can do, then you're more likely to continue that over time. The next thing is, this is a really common mistake. Don't assume just because you're smart, you're going to pass the tests. I always share a story about an Oxford PhD student, which I worked with many years ago. She was super smart. She worked on a European energy project. And I told her that she had to practice for online tests. I think I'd only been coaching for about a year. And she sort of looked at me as if to say, don't you know who I am? Don't you know how smart I am? I heard back from her after about a month, and she said that she'd failed every single online test that she'd taken, because this isn't about intelligence. This is just about staying humble and learning how to do something. It's just like, yes, it's going to help you, but if you can ride a bicycle, there are more skills needed, or different skills needed, to ride a unicycle or to ride a motorized bike. They are similar, but they are not the same. And the last key idea is expect to start bad. Most people are bad at online tests. So if you're taking online tests and you just think, God, I'm really bad, I'm never going to get better, you will. Because again, returning back to point one, deliberate practice makes perfect. So if you practice deliberately and consistency, you will improve at online tests, but do expect to start bad. So when should you start practicing and how much should you practice? The short answer is as soon as possible. So if you're watching this and you're thinking about applying to jobs, or you're thinking about, well, I haven't really applied, when should I start practicing? As soon as possible. And if you can, I've always set a benchmark of a test a day. It's pretty time consuming, but I would say within about 2 months, you're going to be fine. So that's probably doing about 60 tests, which seems like a lot, but actually it isn't. Maybe in a month, if you're super consistent, then you might get better faster. The reason being is you'll generally get invited to submit an online test within a very short space of time. A lot of companies now, they'll just ask you to submit an online test immediately, and you'll only have 5 days to submit your online test. So if you're waiting to practice for online tests until you have an online test, is generally too late. So you don't want to wait by that. So to get ready, be ready. And there's a really simple structure that I've used with clients over the years. So start by practicing one of each type of test. We tend to concentrate on numerical, logical, and SJT, because verbal tests don't come up that much for the type of companies and industries that we're aiming for. See where your weakest areas. So generally someone will be very good at one area, okay at another, and awful at another one. So say, for example, you get a 3 out of 10 for logical, then this is where you want to start. So you want to concentrate on the worst first, and you're trying to pull your scores up to about a 7 or an 8 out of 10, something around that level. Ideally, before you take the real test, you want to be getting at least 70% on a certain type of test 3 times in a row before you take it in real life. That's reasonably accurate, not just getting it once and going, yeah, I did it. Like, you want to be able to do that on a consistent basis across different types of tests, not the same test. By different type, I mean 3 different types of numerical tests. That's a good benchmark to aim for, and it should really help you in terms of passing online tests. Next up, I wanted to talk about free versus paid test practice. I know a lot of students won't have money, and they'll just say, well, I'm just going to find a free test. Free is good as a one-off, but not for consistent practice. So what I tend to find is that for each type of test, you're going to have to probably practice at least 10 of those types of tests. So what that means is that you're going to be wasting a lot of time and energy trying to find tests when you could just pay a small price and save yourself the hassle, because you're going to find 1 to 2 types of free tests. So for example, here, assessment day are great, and they've got 2 free tests of each different type, and also these are each different provider of online tests. That's great, but 2 is not enough. You probably need a minimum of 10. So what it means is, if you're trying to hunt down free tests, you're just going to waste a crap load of time, and that's not really something you want to do. So we've used Job Test Prep since we started Job Ready English. I've used them since 2020. It's about, at the time of doing this, it's £69 for 3 months. Use the code Job Ready for £10 off. I just like them because they're consistent, and they've been around. They've been around for the longest time that I've known, and I've seen a lot of test providers come and go. So they've been around since '92. They've got over 16,000 questions. To give you a bit of an idea of scale, graduates first which is probably the next or one of the next biggest test providers, only has 1,300 questions. It's a stable system. And most importantly, which is crucial for a paid test provider, they've got good answer explanations. One thing you want from an online test provider is if you get the questions wrong, you want an explanation that's going to be easy for you to understand and go, oh, I understand why I've got that wrong. If the explanations are awful, which I tend to see from a lot of new providers which haven't been around for a long time, because it takes time. So Job Test Prep have had like 30 years to refine their explanations, and they've got quite a big team behind them. I would also say I do quite like Graduates First, but just for their game-based assessments. They're really good for that. And we'll return and sort of talk a little bit about Graduates First and game-based assessments in a bit. Types and what types of tests to practice. So there are 6 major providers of online tests. It's something that not a lot of people really know. There are lots of different providers, but there are sort of 6 main ones that have been around. If you're going to start anywhere, start off with SHL and Connexa tests. The reason being is they probably make up 70% of the tests that are out there. So it's the old kind of 80-20 rule. So if you're going to go, oh, I want to practice one provider of tests, then you just practice SHL tests. And really, there's not a massive amount of difference between them, being frankly honest with you. So some people get really fixated, like, oh, it's a Cubics test or it's a Saville test. It's all the same. The information might be presented slightly differently. The diagrams might be a bit more colorful, a bit more interactive, but it's a logical test is a logical test. A numerical test is a numerical test, right? So yeah, I would start off here on SHL and Connexa tests and just move on. So the different types of tests, numericals, with numerical tests, so generally you tend to get a lot of charts and graphs and tables. Some people, and I'm going to talk about the common problems that people have with online tests at the end, but some people might struggle with diagrams. I've noticed people really struggling with graphs or tables. Again, how will you get better? Practice. The more you see of something, the easier that is going to be, because you have increased your exposure and you're able to make a greater degree and level of distinction when going for online tests. You tend to get 60 seconds a question. Some people struggle with this. The maths isn't hard. So sometimes I've had people turn around and say, oh, I only did GCSE maths. A 12-year-old could do the calculations. It's really not that difficult. But what makes all online tests difficult is not the complexity of the problem. I'd say apart from probably management consultancy firms, what makes it difficult is the limited amount of time that you have. And I'll go into that into a little bit more detail. Verbal tests. I love this little diagram from assessment day. So these tests vary widely. The most common type of verbal test are true, false, don't know statements. We don't come across these a lot. I would say in any given year that 1% of the tests might be verbal. You should expect this for legal and anything which is centered around words, like a job that's really strongly based around words, you'd expect verbal tests. But this is often where, particularly for international students, I see them go down a black hole of trying to get really, really good at verbal tests, and they're never going to take them anyway. It can be challenging for a lack of English fluency because it's very obscure. A lot of the kind of the meanings, it's just quite difficult to understand. People have similar problems with it. Situational judgment tests, but personally, I'd avoid it unless you really need to do them and you're absolutely sure you're going to get a verbal test. I just wouldn't bother. It's about a minute per question for this. Logical tests, it really depends. Some people love logical tests. They are purposely diagrammatic style tests are purposely designed to be to level the playing field for people whose first language is not English, because you don't need to speak the language to understand the diagrams. And some people hate logical tests. They're similar if you've ever done any kind of like Mensa style or IQ test. It's all about pattern recognition. What makes this really quite hard is the fact that you only have 30 seconds. So you'll kind of have this sort of diagram and then they'll say, oh, what's the next one? Again, practice and also understanding about Pattern recognition is really quite important for logical tests, but again, that gets better with practice. Now, I would say by far and away, the tests that most students struggle with are SJTs tests, particularly if you haven't really had a lot of work experience. These tend to be ranked either best, worst. I find most people are okay. Where a lot of people really struggle is when you have to arrange best, worst for 5 answers. And these tend to be sort of, it's easy to say the best and worst answer, but it's like rank 2, 3, and 4 where people really struggle. Questions will tend to be quite specific to the company and the industry. I think a good thing to know about this is what you'd be expected to do in the role. But again, this is all about practice. And if you're really struggling with SJT, understanding the logic behind why one option is slightly better than the other. A lot of times what I notice with people is because they sort of believe that they should do it themselves or that they're right, and they don't kind of think, oh, I'd speak to my manager maybe because they haven't had one, or I'd speak to a member of my team or something like that. So these are definitely something which get better with practice, but this is certainly the style of test what I find most people struggle with and requires quite a lot of practice. It's also quite hard to find a lot of SJT style questions and tests, which is another reason why I like job test prep, because they seem to have loads, which makes it easier. Again, it's one of those things, you get used to all the different styles of scenarios. There's really not that many different styles of scenarios at work. I've had a problem, my manager's away, element of dishonesty, teamwork, resolving an issue, resolving a conflict, fixing a problem. There aren't that many variations of work style problems. And once you've been through 10 of these tests, you're pretty much going to know what you're doing. But they can be tricky to start off with if you haven't had a lot of work experience. Game-based assessments, these are getting more and more popular. I'm not going to go into them in too much detail because it's something that you have to do rather than something that I can explain. The most popular one that people have come across is it's a balloon popping test, which is for PwC. Deloitte does them as well. A lot of big companies have done it ever since Arctic Shores came around, which is this company here. I think in about 2017 they've been around. So Arctic Shores have been around since, I wonder if they're going to do their history. No, I haven't got it here. But yeah, Arctic Shores are really interesting. I provided a couple of different resources, whether it be Assessment Day, a memory card game, Mind Metric are pretty cool, talent games. Debut have a brilliant app. A lot of companies use Debut. Debut will design the game-based assessments, and then they'll let students take it for free. Debut app. So yeah, graduate jobs and advice. Yeah, this is really quite cool, and you can just download the app on your phone and start practicing straight away, which is awesome. Definitely something that I recommend. They may have changed in complexity a little bit, like find opportunities, receive messages, and they'll run different styles of tests for different companies. So they're really cool. If you're looking for a best, for me, the kind of the best paid one out there is probably Graduates First. If you're in the UK watching this and you're at university, you've probably got a Graduates First account. I think they're in, over 100 universities now. They've got some pretty cool tests. I think they've got 4 games and they're always adding more, but game-based assessment, you don't really explain them, you just do them and you sort of get used to. So with PwC's balloon game, it's all about risk reward. And whether you're engaged in a greater and greater level of risk to let this balloon blow up and then pop, which is really not the type of person that they're looking for. They're looking for someone who's a bit more conservative, because the skills will relate to the job that you're going for. So yeah, some cool, really handy links just to go there and practice it yourself, because I think that is much with all online tests, that's the best thing. So I want to talk about some common problems Just three general common problems and then common problems related to different types of tests. Lack of practice. If you're doing really badly at online tests, I would strongly argue that 80% of your problems will be fixed by more practice. So whenever I speak to clients and they'll say, oh, I keep failing online tests, and I'll say, how many tests have you practiced for each type? And they'll go, oh, 5. Conservatively, you need to practice a minimum of 10 of each type of test. For some people, it's more like 20 and above. And you may come across concepts and sticking points that really just don't make any sense to you. What we tend to do with our premium clients is that we'll go through and do screen share and explain the logic, and we design custom material around particular types of tests. But I would say if you're still really struggling with online tests, then you just need to practice more. Practice almost inevitably, and also it should be paid practice, not free practice, because if you're practicing loads of random free tests, they tend to also give so free tests will either be, actually I can pop off the screen share now. So free tests are either going to be really easy or really hard. So they'll be really hard because it's like, oh, you didn't do well at the online test, so now you need to buy our pack. Or they'll be really easy, like, oh, now you feel really good about yourself, let us send you your results, and then you can be added to our mailing list. Because essentially they're giving the test for free because it's a sales tool. It's something that they're using to get you to take an action or to get a particular result. They're not just giving it for free because they're super nice like that. It's all business tools. The next common problem is timing. By far and away, the biggest problem that people will struggle with is being able to operate within the time. So answering logical questions within 30 seconds or answering a numerical question within 60 seconds. And that's all something that comes with practice. Very often, whenever I see candidates starting to practice tests, they're going to really struggle to complete a test. So say it has 20 questions, they'll find that they'll only do 15 questions. So already they're at a disadvantage. So definitely in that first sort of week or 2 weeks, it's just getting your head around being very quick with your answers and being able to get through those questions effectively. And then the timing gets better and it's more about accuracy. The third problem is language. I think you do need certainly a good level of English reading ability and the ability to read quite quickly. If reading is something that you struggle with quite a lot, or you struggle to take in information at a good rate, I highly recommend just taking a speed reading course. You don't have to pay for it. If you search speed reading Tim Ferriss on YouTube, you'd find a video. If you watched it, you could probably, I would say, 1.5 times or 2 times your reading ability in a fairly short space of time. It's really not that difficult to do. It's just not something that many people think about when they're like, my reading is really bad. So you think, well, what's the strategy that I can use so that I could read faster, read better, do more? So those are sort of three general common problems. All of those stem from a lack of practice. So if you're struggling, practice more. That's always the simple answer. And with practice, what I'd say is, I would say 1 test a day maximum. The reason being is I regularly see people get a little bit burnt out practicing online tests because they're so boring. It's not sexy at all, just kind of sitting there in front of a computer and like clicking different options and so on and so forth. So 1 test a day is generally the sweet spot, or as few tests as you feel like you could do progressively over time. 3 a week, 2 a week, 1 a week, whatever it is. Like probably if you're getting to 1 a week, then your progress is going to be pretty slow. Common questions that I tend to find with SJT style test is not understanding how to rank. So ranking things, not really, number one, it's not reading the question properly. So people won't really read the question and take it in, then they won't know how to rank effectively. And also thinking about, so there's a simple 6-part structure which we tend to use with SJT style tests, which is what's the problem, who are the people involved, what's the result that we're seeking to achieve, what is the process of that we need to go through to communicate and to solve that problem? Is there any more information required? And is there, I'm just trying to think about what I would normally do for part 5. Let's just pull this up. So yeah, the context. Who's involved? What do they need? Who gets priority if there's more than one person? What are your responsibilities and obligations? What is your position on authority? And what is the wider context of the role you're applying to in real life? Um, just because context matters when it comes to those questions, it's very difficult to explain that in the abstract, but I find those sort of 6 things make it significantly easier in terms of answering situational judgment test style questions. And again, just practice. Numerical style questions, the most common problem I find is reading graphs. If like graphs plus table equals problem, a lot of people really struggle with reading graphs and tables, or just trying to input quite a large amount of information. That one pretty much resolves itself through practice pretty effectively. Having a calculator on hand, and you might, for example, I do find quite a few people who struggle with ratios, percentages, and also just rushing and not reading through the whole question. So they won't sort of do all the stages of the question. And definitely having a pen and a piece of paper. It's a little bit old school maybe now for some of you youngsters, but just having something where you can just write stuff down at the same time, because you've only got 60 seconds. Logical questions, it's all about pattern recognition. So with logical questions, I tend to find the biggest problem is like identify exactly what is happening with every single element of that shape or shapes as it moves from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 and so on. What a lot of people do is they don't really, in the beginning, if you really struggle with pattern recognition, then I would just answer one question, see the answer, understand the pattern. Answer another question, see the answer, understand the pattern. Where a lot of people make quick progress is they really spend the time to understand where is the logic, where is the flawed logic in their thinking as they are answering these questions, and they'll see that through the explanation. A lot of times it's just a logic problem. So it's basically like, oh, I thought I could answer this question by doing this, but actually this is wrong. I need to do that, and so on and so forth. And then once you kind of have that light bulb moment in terms of logic, then it becomes significantly easier for you to answer those questions. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for online tests, covering quite a lot, but just a basic set practice for online tests. 1 test a day, starting that as soon as possible as you can, and being consistent with that over time. Really, you shouldn't struggle with online tests. And what I would say is on the other side of it, once we get clients to progressively pass online tests, they virtually never fail, because just like riding a bike, it's a learned skill. So once you know how to do the numerical, logical, and SJT tests, it's just a breeze. You just find it so easy. So that's everything on online tests. Okay, what's up, guys? Over the next 2 sessions, I'm going to be going through really what has been sort of the summation of 9 years of experience of preparing clients for thousands of interviews across hundreds of different companies, probably every company that you could possibly think of, which I sort of condensed, not just in a course, but also the Interview Success Secrets Masterclass. So we're going to go through about, kind of halfway through this, just to get through part of the way, and then continue this on into session 2. Session 2 is really more going to be about practice. A lot of that kind of comes into that. A really good accompaniment to this, which is included in this course, is the 28 most common interview questions answered, which is a phenomenal book. It took us about 3 months to put that together. It's got it's got sample answers and worksheets for every single one of the most common questions you could come across And I reckon if you work through those worksheets in that book, it'll prepare you for probably 80 to 90% of the questions that you're going to get asked in interviews. And that's my experience. And that's a lot of repetitions and iterations across many different companies and since 2013. So what we're going to talk about today, just to kind of qualify myself. So I've been coaching since 2013. I've prepped clients for over 2,000 interviews. That's a conservative estimate. I'll be honest, I haven't really counted. I've done over 8,000 hours of one-to-one interview coaching. Our Past the Interview series is probably getting on towards sort of like 600,000-700,000 views. The courses that I've created, been creating courses around sort of English and interviews since 2017. That's been taken now by well over 5,000 students. And essentially, I've built my reputation on being able to help people get jobs and pass interviews. So, you know, this isn't advice or feedback. This is actionable strategies and tactics that I've used over a long period of time, which I wanted to share with you. So this is kind of the process that everybody goes through. You get an interview, everyone thinks, oh crap, what questions are they going to ask me? Then you research the questions. You'd want to prepare scripts for the why questions first. Why do you want to work for Deloitte? Why do you want to be an auditor? Why you? You'd prepare your star stories, which we're going to talk about, which is our system that we use to massively decrease the time and the number of scripted answers that you need to prepare for. This is something that people waste an inordinate amount of time on. You match your stories to the competency questions you practice. Practice should make up the majority of your time prior to an interview. And by practice, I mean speaking out loud. I'm going to talk about this in much more detail in part 2. But a lot of people don't practice enough. They just prepare lots of scripts and research lots of questions, and then they really come unstuck during interviews. And then you'll crush it. You will crush your interview. Maybe not your first one. Everyone sort of gets nervous, and some people's nerves gets better of them. The more interviews you do, the more practice you do, the better you get. Simple. So when you get an interview, how much time should I spend doing what? Which is a really good question. So 80% of first round interviews for top companies are via video. That's conservative. Numbers floating around are about 86%. The average time to prepare and submit is 5 days, which is really not that much time. So there's only really 3 things you need to do. Research the questions, prepare your scripts, practice your answers. And that should kind of break down to this. 10% of your time should be spent doing research, about an afternoon, maybe not more than that. If you figure out how much time have I got in the next 5 days, maybe you've got 10 hours. I suppose that would be quite a lot, wouldn't it? But really, would you need to spend more than an hour researching questions? No. Preparing scripts, so maybe 4 hours, getting your scripts ready, you know, writing them first of all, and then editing, refining them, and maybe shortening them, putting them on, you know, into bullet points or cards. And 50% of your time should be spent practicing your answers. Speaking it out loud, because ultimately what you tested on in a video interview, how you communicate when you talk. So most people will spend way too much time, 70 to 80% of their time, researching questions and writing scripts. And then if they do practice, they'll just kind of read their scripts out loud over and over again, and then wonder why they come unstuck when they get asked a question which they don't know the answer to. And then what happens is the day before, they kind of have a mad dash to remember 30 pages worth of scripts, and they feel that their brain is melting, you know. So like I said, it all boils down to this. What do you spend most of your time doing in an interview? Speaking. So you want to practice speaking your answers out loud as much as possible, and if possible, without a script. Ideally, if you had 5 days to prepare, day 1 and 2 should be spent researching and getting your scripts together. Days 3 to 5 is all about practicing your answers so you can move from a full script to reading out loud. A full script you read out loud, then you'd shorten that full script to bullet points, and maybe even having no prompts at all. being able just to speak on cue and speak fluidly. So let's talk about step one, which is research. So we're going to systematically go through exactly what you need to do. That's the whole purpose of what we're trying to do. So this is not general advice. It's very clear steps that we can take. Everything that we do is based around offering clear and actionable framework. So the first thing everybody thinks when they get an interview is, I wonder what they're going to ask me. Then you think about the thousands of questions you could get asked, and then you obsess about getting asked the one question that you didn't prepare for, which means you end up spending hours and hours online and writing scripts for every possible question that you could find on the internet. This is wrong. This is not a good strategy. There's always going to be a question that you didn't prepare for. You can't stop that. Why? Because there could be a question which random people on the internet haven't even posted. So there's really no point in trying to prepare for every single question, because if we prepare with breadth, i.e. we try and prepare for 100 questions, our preparation will have no depth. So we're not going to be very good at answering any one of those. We're just going to kind of have an answer. Questions change all the time, and your research is only as good as your sources, and your sources is generally random people on the internet. But there is a better way. So we call this the star 28 method, or star stories. What we tend to do, and we like, I've used this for many years, is we build a reserve of stories based on your experiences that you can use to answer most questions. Because 90% of interview questions are going to be a mixture of motivational, why you, why this role, why this company, and competency questions. A time when you worked in a team, led a team, resolved a conflict, and so on and so forth. The other 10% of the questions you can find in your research, which we're going to talk about how to do that as well. So the majority of your preparation for all your interviews boils down to 28 questions. And these are the questions that we have prepared clients for week in, week out for years. So researching questions online. Let's do this together, guys. So we're going to, we tend to like using Glassdoor. Glassdoor is awesome. If you don't know about it, then you should definitely use it. So say, for example, we wanted to, so we're going to log in. So say, for example, you've got an interview coming up with, oh, Morgan Stanley comes to mind because I just had a young lady messaging me about that today. So Morgan Stanley. We're going to look for interviews. We're going to search. We're going to, so there are 7,000 Morgan Stanley interview questions shared by candidates. So we want to sort by date. So you'll see here, these are questions that were asked from July. What we do is that we get a document. A document that looks like this. And we'd start picking out questions. Now, of course, it does depend on the role. So you might be going for an internship. What do you not want to do in this position? Pop that in here. Software engineer. Tell me about a time you worked well as part of a group. Questions were specific to my role. Why should we choose you? Oh, what are the 5 values? Summer analyst is also for internship. And we'd go through and we just keep going. So what happens is anytime that I have a repeat question, summer analyst, why are you a good fit for Morgan Stanley? Cool, another question. Put that in here. So anytime I have a repeat for a question, just put an X next to it. And so on and so forth. The reason why I do that is because if those questions are coming up multiple times, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to get asked that question. Because when it comes to me preparing for questions in order, I want to make sure that I'm prepared for the question which has come up. Doesn't mean it will come up, but it's certainly more likely to. You're more likely to have a slightly better source of information through Glassdoor, just because it's specifically targeted around people getting jobs and wanting to share information. There are other great resources out there as well, I'm sure, but Glassdoor has always served us really well. And pretty quickly, if you went through 6 months, that's probably, let's see, I reckon by, oh, it's a lot for Morgan Stanley. So you might even do less. So maybe, what, we're 9 pages in, 2 months back. I wouldn't go any further than 6 months, and that's it, pretty much done. And that's how we research questions. I mean, that took me about 4 minutes. It could take you an hour, but probably not. It's really quite a simple thing to do. And you'll have a list of questions there. And you're really looking for questions that are not the norm. So you're looking for questions that are outside of the 28 questions, which you'll become more familiar with in part 2. So if they're like, why do you want to work for Morgan Stanley? Why do you want to be a summer analyst? You're looking for questions that are a little bit weird and wonderful. So they could be technical questions. They could be brain teasers, situational judgment tests. They could be commercial awareness questions, job specific questions around commercial terms, commercial and business acumen. But that's kind of what you're looking for, because they're not really questions you need to prepare for. It's enough to just know that they exist, because actually if you look up the answer, then you'll probably remember it. So yeah, you know, we use Glassdoor 90% of the time. We look for repetition, nothing older than 6 months. 8 to 10 questions is enough. Why 8 to 10? Because you're unlikely to get asked more than 10 questions in an interview. If you think that you get a minute to prepare, maybe 2 minutes to answer, most interviews aren't going to last longer than half an hour. A video interview, face to face, you're probably going to get about the same number of questions, because there's going to be an element of conversation and delay. I'm certainly yet to hear of an interview where someone's got more than 15 or 20 questions, because it gets just as tiring for the interviewer as the person getting interviewed. Because we have what's called the law of diminishing returns. Yes, that question could come up, but is it worth you preparing 10 or 20 questions really, really well, or 100 questions kind of just okay? I know which one I prefer. So what if there are no questions, the company is too small? You just rely on the 28 most common questions that we've given you, because the chances are pretty good if you're interviewing for a small company, it's just a mixture of motivational and competency questions. What if there are loads of questions? We tend to concentrate on the 10 questions that repeat the most. That seems to work for us really well. And you'll tend to find that once you go through the interview, you're probably prepared for 80 to 90% of the questions. You might get 1 or 2 questions you didn't prepare for, but that would be the same probably if you prepared for 5 times the amount of questions. So let's talk about writing scripts, which is kind of the 40% of your time. This realistically is going to be half of day 1 and then part of day 2, right? So because day 3 to 5, you're going to be preparing to read your answers out loud. So you've got a list of questions. You need to write some great answers. So we're going to talk about what great scripts include and what they are. So how long should they be? How long should you talk for? And what should you include? So scripts should generally be about 100 words a minute. If you so wish, you could actually go away and time how quickly that you speak. Just take a standard book off your bookshelf or read something from your phone, set a timer for 60 seconds, and then read it out loud. Count the number of words, or if you want to be kind of estimate that, then count the average number of words in 3 sentences, divide by 3 to get your average number of words per sentence, and then count how many sentences you read. Most people are going to be around 100, 125 words a minute. 125 words a minute is quite fast. So my experience of listening to hundreds of different people is that if they're talking about 125 words per minute or more, they'll start to gasp. They might get dry throat. They'll tend to run into their words a bit more, not pause for breath. So why 100 words? 125 words, gasp, rush, swallow a lot, dry mouth, fall over your words, leave no pause in between sentences. Less is fine. You might speak slowly. I tend to speak quite slowly. I tend to speak faster when I'm training somebody or a group or filming a course like this, but more probably isn't. Sweet spot for a script length, about 150, 200 words. That'll do. Again, less is more. 100 to 150 words is fine. These are all rough estimates. Please don't feel beholden to this, but this is just my experience having done it hundreds of times. How long should you speak for? About 1 minute, 50 seconds or less. It seems quite precise. Most interview questions give you 2 minutes to answer. You want to run slightly under 2 minutes. But we tend to find if you're practicing by yourself, say you don't have an interview and you're just practicing for interviews by yourself, 2 minutes is a good range to aim for. 90 seconds a bit short, 3 minutes a bit long. And if you're sitting there going, I can't possibly fit everything that I have to say in 2 minutes, then you're saying too much. You're not getting to the point fast enough. And you're probably spending way too much time talking about yourself, honestly, in my opinion and my experience. So what should you include in your scripts? You always want to make sure that you want to give strong examples when writing your scripts. If someone says, what's your greatest strength? You'll be like, I'm the most intelligent human in the world. And of course, that person, whether they believe you or not, the next thing they're going to say is, why? According to what? And you might say, well, I was in this super difficult championship and crowned the most intelligent person in the world. And they'll be like, okay, that's cool. Or I'm the, most beautiful princess at the party, and so on and so forth. We call these star stories. Most of your questions will be competency based. So we'll use the STAR techniques, which we'll talk about later. The vast majority of interviews are just competency and motivation questions. Literally, this will be the interview. They'll say, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work for blah? Why do you want to do blah? Then they'll ask you a couple of competency questions, maybe 3 to 5. So you'll have like 6 to 8 questions, then you're done. Yeah. So what are motivational questions? Let's just define these just to give you some kind of idea. So motivation is a reason or reasons for acting or behaving in a particular way. So we give clear reasons why we want to do a job and we think we are the right person. To distinguish ourselves from other people, we have to be really specific. A good example of this is someone says, why do you want to work for this company? I go, I really want to work for XY company because it's really big and it's got a great reputation and I'd get a chance to learn and work with really good people. And I think that none of those factors distinguish company A from company B. That's why we get quite specific about the facts. Is it because of their projects? Is it because of something specific to do with their people? Is it their annual revenue? Is it their profit? Is it their technology, their news, their awards? But pick something specific. A simple way to look at this is, can this be said for any other company? If yes, then you're not being specific enough. Be more specific. And honestly, when people don't prepare for this question, it's just sheer laziness. It'll take you 15 minutes to go and find out some facts about a company. It's really not that difficult. And it's quite a shame when people don't prepare for it because they just kick themselves afterwards. So it tends to come down to 3 questions. Why are you the right person for the job? Also, why you? Why do you want to work at the company? And why do you want to work in that job? What are competency questions? So also known as behavioral questions. To be competent is to have the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. Competency questions are pretty much everywhere. You get the odd interview now that might just be strength based, but Competencies are still probably the best way. Why? Because a job has a certain list of skills that a person needs, and a competency asks them to prove that they have those skills. Strength questions don't really do that. SJT questions don't really do that. Commercial questions don't really do that. Motivational questions. There isn't another way to self-assess somebody's skill apart from saying, give me a time when you worked in a team, and listening to that person describe what they believe teamwork is and why they were good at it. The interview will generally have a list of set questions, each focusing on a specific skill, and your answers will be compared to the skills that they want for the job. This is a really big, important sentence. Why? Because you pretty much know what question you're going to get asked. If you look at the skill set for a job, they're going to ask you questions about those skills. So if you don't know how to prepare, just read the description and see what type of person they're looking for. Oh, we're looking for somebody who's adaptable and flexible. Then don't be surprised if they ask you your question and says, give me a time when you're adaptable or flexible, and so on and so forth. Employer wants someone with teamwork skills. They ask, tell me about a time you worked in a team. And they want real life examples where you have used that skill or competence in the past. So some kind of key competencies, skills regularly sought after by employers include flexibility, teamwork, leadership, adaptability, organization, decisiveness, independence, communication, problem solving, conflict resolution, commercial awareness. These are just the most common skills that we see come up time and time again. It's not an exhaustive list. Again, not really that useful to give you a list of 700 different skills. We're not going to prepare examples for all of them. We're only really interested in the skills that the employer is looking for. The STAR technique is the best way to answer competency interview questions and is the style we teach our clients to use. It's been around for a long time. So you answer questions by giving a specific situation. You describe the situation and when did it take place. A task, you explain the task and what was the objective. The action, give details about the action you took to achieve this and the result of the situation you're describing. So here's an example for you. Question, describe a situation where you worked as part of a team. Teamwork. Situation, 10%. During my postgraduate studies at Dundee University, I was put into a team of 4 for our asset management module. What were you doing? Where were you? Task, 15%. Between us, we had to choose a company and carry out a financial analysis using Excel, and then present the strengths and weaknesses of that company, as well as using a mathematical model to show whether we believed it would be a good investment or not. We chose Apple. So we're digging in a little bit more. What specifically was it that you were doing? What was the list of things that you had to do? Action, as I didn't have a background in finance and I'd only just started my studies, I deferred the leadership to one of my classmates. While they discussed giving out tasks, I suggested we should each do something that plays to our strengths. 2 of our team would carry out a financial analysis of Apple. 1 would create the model based on the analysis. Then I would put the presentation together in PowerPoint and lead the presentation. We have a heavy workload and several times we were falling behind. So I would call each member and see if they needed help, or if there was anything I could do. I helped to coordinate communication and resolve any differences between the team. So this is the action. What did you do that makes you good at teamwork? What skills did you demonstrate? Result, 5%. Our presentation went well and we received a high grade from our tutor who was impressed with the depth of our analysis. So as a result of the action that you took, did you get the result that you wanted to achieve? So there are 2 things to recognize from this. First, the items in bold for the actions are things we would say to show that we are good at teamwork. We should each do something playing to our strengths, knowing yourself. Put the presentation together in PowerPoint and led the presentation, doing your work to help the team. Call each member, communication, see if they needed help, being helpful. To coordinate communication and resolve any differences, conflict resolution. We'll do this for every competency question. It's pretty easy. we list ideas for skills and things to include for each question. So second thing to notice is the percentages. We love systems, so we just break star into numbers, makes it really easy to write out your answer. Situation and the task. Situation, 10%. Where were you and when was this? Task, 15%. What were you asked to do? Action, 70%. What did you do? This is the most important part. Result, 5%. What happened? What did you achieve? Again, these are rough percentages. The big idea is that the majority of your answer is based around your actions. So your star stories. Start with the stories which put you in the best light. So there is an order of example preference. We would want to start with work, because this is a job interview. Then any sort of volunteering, which is like working without getting paid. Then society stuff, clubs, societies, teams. Finally, academic. And really, we don't need to go anywhere from that. We wouldn't want to use personal. When I say start with the stories in the best light, they're just stories that you tell anyway to your family and friends. We all love to tell stories that make us look good. All your examples should have positive results. So like, I did this thing and cool stuff happened. Choose 5 to 6 examples which you can clearly explain. So this means that regardless of the question, you will be able to use the story in the answer. Some stories are quite specific, but you'll find that most stories can be used to answer quite a few different questions. I often get asked, oh, but what if I tell the same story twice? So what? Repetition is fine. You don't have to use a new example, a new story. Repetition is pretty normal. You know, if someone's only had one job for the last 10 years, they're not going to talk about different jobs. They're going to talk about the same job, aren't they? Try to pick examples you feel confident and happy talking about. What I mean by that is, if you have work experience, but you don't feel comfortable talking about that, or you don't like that, or you don't want to share that, then talk about something else. You know, say, oh God, I've got to use this work experience, but I really hated working at this shoe store I was at, and I find it embarrassing. Okay. I mean, it's not embarrassing at all, but it's a matter of personal choice. And pick one negative example, because you're bound to come across some kind of negative, like a time when you failed to meet a deadline. You just give a positive result based on the action that you took, i.e., what did you learn? And you can then match a star story to each of the 28 questions and your research. So these are the 28 questions, and we're going to end this session here, because when we come back, we're going to be working through some examples so you can see how we deal with answering some of these different types of questions. All of these are covered in the 28 questions answered book, which is going to be included as part of the course. Introduce yourself, why this company, why this role, why you, and so on and so forth. There'll be a list of these questions as well that you can refer to, and some more questions here. So we're going to leave it there, and we'll carry on in part 2, talking more about the minutiae of answering these questions, using these worksheets, and how we can then put these scripts to good use for really effective practice. Okay, so in part 1, we left off talking about the 28 questions, and of course, you've got your 28 questions answered, which includes worksheets and free sample answers for each of these questions. And what I wanted to do in this session is to talk about a couple of these, just walk you through them so you can get a feel for it. And then finally to talk about, you know, once we've researched our questions, got our scripts together, what would we do next? So tell me about yourself. Probably the most commonly looked up question, definitely on YouTube, Google. This is always the question where you want to start first. Starting off with a personal introduction really gets us in the mind of being able to sell ourselves. It might need a couple of redrafts and repeats. And remember, we're looking to nail this in about 2 minutes or so. So it gives you a really solid foundation for everything else you'll do. So if you don't know where to start and you're prepping for an interview, or you don't even have an interview, then start off here for sure. It should really contain 5 things. Introduction, academic background, what job you want and why, work experience, volunteering, clubs, interests and hobbies. If you don't know what job you want and why, then just leave that off. So what are they really asking? This is an opportunity for your employer or the interview to form more about you. And in all honesty, it might be just that they haven't had a chance to read your CV. They've had a super busy day and they're just wanting to get to know you from your perspective rather than going through your CV. And like I said, we always get new clients to prepare a personal introduction first. It's the quickest way to learn how to sell yourself and run through your experience and skills. So here's an example. Hi, my name is Susan, and I'm currently studying a postgraduate degree in biochemistry at Dundee University. What's your name? What are you doing? And where are you doing it? Quick blurb about your background. I'm originally from China and studied chemistry at Nanjing University, where I finished third in my class. I won several scholarships for my academic results. Where are you from? What have you done before? I'd say like maybe in the last 2 to 3 years. What do you want to do next and why? I'm keen to work in a pharmaceutical company like GSK because I want to be at the cutting edge of research and develop my skills for designing and testing new drugs. Plus, I think drug design is a great way to help so many people improve their health. Super short, 2 to 3 sentences about the company that you want to work for and why you want to work for them. Work experience, clubs and societies. I interned at 2 large Chinese drug manufacturers. Though mainly working in sales and marketing to help companies' brands and sell their products straight to market. This was a great opportunity for me to learn how big pharma works and talk directly with clients. Also, I learned how to work and communicate as a member of a large team. During my time in China, I was part of our local dance team. We won several awards in a competition at our school. So you'll notice the bit about work experiences, again, 4 sentences, and we're sort of picking out 1 or 2 things that may be of interest to the interviewer, which we could learn from the job description. So what are they looking for? What they're really pointing out in this personal introduction is that they know how big pharma works, and they've also talked to clients, and they know how to work as part of a team. Little bit about clubs and societies. So being part of a local dance team, just something a little bit different, another element of teamwork. If you don't have work experience, then just talk about volunteering, clubs and societies, anything that you've done outside of academics. Anything else, interests, hobbies? I've played badminton since as a young girl. I enjoy the exercise and the adrenaline, as well as the competitive nature of the sport. I feel regular exercise helps me stay focused on my studies. I also play the guzhong, which is an ancient Chinese plucking instrument. I am a grade 8. So this is really just getting to know you a little bit more as a person rather than as a professional, and just something that is of interest. Next common question, and we put these in because it's pretty likely you're going to get asked all of these questions. So it's nice to kind of break these down with you during the course. Why are you being asked this? Well, no one wants to employ somebody who doesn't really know about the company. We've all applied for jobs and then gone, got on a phone call and say, oh, I'm ringing to talk to you about the job that you've applied for. Chances are you've applied to a lot. And you're like, could you just remind me which company that is? The company wants to know that you actually care. And you put a little bit of work in. And by that, I mean 15 minutes. So what's the interviewer actually asking? Lots of people have applied, but very few will really know about the company. If you worked for Sony, then you want someone else who knew a little bit about Sony. And a lot of people will give super vague and general answers like it's big and famous, lots of opportunities, I get to travel, work with a great team, all that kind of stuff. And a good rule of thumb here is that if I could say it about another company, then I'm probably not being specific enough. So what's the best way to answer this? Just put a little bit of time in, 15 minutes realistically. Choose 2 to 6 unique facts about that company. You can do more or less depending on how long you've got to answer. Most people can rattle off 6 facts. That's fairly easy. So here's some ideas of what types of facts you can use. Could be financials, so profit, loss, revenue, famous clients, key events, whether that's projects, products, policies, awards that they've won, unique language that they use in their core values, ideals, or mission statement, white papers, if they're a consulting firm or professional services firm, release a lot of white papers, their history, what are they famous for, or any industry news that is relevant to them or that they featured in. So here's an example. For over 30 years, Capita has provided innovative technology solutions to various clients, from the government to businesses. From the start, Capita is driven by the core values of being open and ingenious, making it a market leader with a market capitalization of over £600 million and 4 billion in annual revenue. The scale of the business is impressive, with more than 60,000 employees and operations around the world. At Capita, I'd have the chance to work on a wide range of exciting projects. So you've kind of got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unique facts about Capita, which probably can't be said about anybody else. Why this role? So again, you're being asked to see if you've done your homework and researched the role, which basically means read the job description, see what skills are needed, and research into people's past experience with the role. If the job description is not that if the job description is not that helpful, then you can just look up a job description from a different company until you find something that is more useful, or find it on a website like prospects.ac.uk. What's the interviewer actually asking? So this is where you need to impress the interviewer to show you're different to the other hundreds of candidates and to make yourself stand out. They'll just really want to know that you understand what you're going to do and that you can communicate what skills that you need. To understand this is a simple process. Copy and paste your job description into a document. Highlight 2 key areas: the responsibilities, what are you going to do, and the skills, the abilities you need to do that. Then pick out 2 to 3 responsibilities and 2 to 3 skills that you feel confident about talking in your answer, either because you know what they are or you just can easily talk about them. And then you would explain what you would do in the job and how you would do it, and give proof where possible. So this is a 2-step process when thinking about this answer. What will you do, and then why would you be good at doing that? So what would you do is from the job description, list out the responsibilities, and you can pull a couple out and reuse them in the answer. Why are you good at it? So that often job descriptions will give you a list of skills. If not, just go and use a website. Prospects is brilliant, and you can find the skills that are needed for that role. I think they've got a couple of hundred jobs in there. Steps to finding information from the job description: find the job you've applied for, read through it thoroughly, find the section which explains the roles and responsibilities, and then take this list and you can use it to start forming your answer. Here's an example of a job description pulled from a random job. So you can see here they explain what you're going to be doing. Then we pulled out these skills from prospects for a similar job. And then you can put it all into an example, something like this. Working in operations, I would focus on a function such as clearing or settling transactions, managing documentation, customer service, compliance, accounting, and potentially risk management. I could be responsible for working on initiatives to enhance settlement processes, ensuring that the information in an organization's profit and loss accounts is correct or that risks are being reported accurately. More importantly, I'll have the chance to work in several different areas of operations, through which I can get a fantastic amount of exposure and variation. This will allow me to understand various types of work available. So this answer is really heavy about what you will be doing, but it also is quite illuminating in pointing out the skills that are going to be needed. This is a different question. So really common competency or behavioral style question. Describe a situation where you worked as part of a team. Why are you getting asked this? Because you're always going to have to work with people. Showing that you're good at teamwork is really crucial, because an employer doesn't want to employ somebody who might be good at the job but is not good with people. So really what they're asking is, are you a team player? Are you the grumpy person that nobody likes being in a team with? What's the best way to answer this? So we just need to find a list of skills that are good for teamwork, and then just include 3 or 4 of them will make for a great answer. That could be organization and planning, decision making, problem solving, communicating, feedback, conflict resolution. There are a ton of skills out there. That's not enough. All you need to do is just punch in teamwork skills into Google, and you'll get lots of different things come up. So here's an example using STAR. In 2017, I worked as an operations manager at a food processing factory in Indonesia. My manager asked that I assemble a team to identify how we could cut costs in the factory. So that's the big picture, the kind of 1 or 2 line summary of what you are asked to do. Task, there were a limited number of ways to cut costs, reduce the quality or price of the raw materials, reduce the number of staff or look at automation, or increase the number of goods we sell, allowing us to order quantities of packaging. So we're zooming in a little bit more about, what actually it is that we had to do. Action. I knew I needed help, so I assembled a team of 4, including myself, which were the production manager, our food scientist, and the head of buying. In our first meeting, I asked for their thoughts. There was lots of heated discussions. So I told them to prepare a report of their savings proposals, come back in 3 days. I spent that time speaking to as many workers as I could and getting their opinions, as well as asking IT for an explanation of our rising costs. I also was careful to assure the staff that no one's job was at risk. Our food scientist called late one night, worried that he wouldn't finish in time. I reassured him on the phone and said I would help in any way I could. Each team member presented their proposal at our meeting, coinciding with my conversation with the factory workers. We were wasting a lot of raw materials which could be reused if caught hygienically. This would require extra equipment, but no other changes. I compiled a final report based on our findings. So how is the candidate showing that they're good at teamwork? Well, first of all, he's listening or she's listening to other people, asking them to go away, and instead of discussing it, saying like, put a proposal together. They're communicating and trying to resolve conflict. They're seeking out help from other members of staff. They're being reassuring and helpful on the phone. And also they're using everybody's information to come to a reasonable conclusion or decision. Result, my boss was happy with our final report. She invested in the machinery and we saved 4% on our running costs. So that was a couple of different examples. Check out the book that's included in the course. It's got a ton more examples like that to understand how to answer any of these questions. So finally, I wanted to spend the time talking about the last of the 3 steps, which is practice. And this should really be making up half of your time. So if you've got those 5 days, by the time that you get to day 3, you really want to be practicing your answer, because repetition is mastery. The more that we repeat something, the more that we engage in the process that we're going to be doing in real life. If you wanted to be a better runner, then you're going to run. Yes, you might do other things like diet, stretching, mobility work, but mainly you're going to run, because that's going to make you a better runner. It's important that you spend as much time as you can speaking your scripts out loud. So writing scripts is fine, but the chances are you're not going to get a lot of joy reading out your scripts during the interview. A lot of people get tripped up this way. We suggest that you get used to saying your answers and recording it. So recording your answers on a phone, and also listening back to your answers and note down a couple of things you could do better. This is really important because it activates the feedback loop. What you don't want to do is just talk to the camera and then do it over and over and over again, because you're just repeating yourself. The mere act of you watching back a video of yourself is going to help your brain to adjust and for you to notice the things that you're doing wrong that could be improved. I'd say repeat this 3 times for each question. If you want to be spot on, do it 6 times. To be honest, if you manage to do it more than that, then you should be super confident going into your interview. You don't need to repeat each question 100 times. 3 repetitions of 3 times is really going to lodge that into your brain, because during an interview you get nervous. So just like a soldier being drilled before they go onto the battlefield, you need to get a certain amount of repetitions for each question so that you can remember it while under pressure. That's where a lot of people fail, because they say, oh, I'm fine, if they're practicing with their friend or by themselves. And then you find that when you're actually in an interview and under pressure, you just have a brain fart. Your mind goes blank and you forget what you're saying. So there are a couple of different things that you can use. So you can use notes. So you can have some handwritten notes that you could have out in front of you. You could also use cue cards. So something that I find is really very useful is to use cue cards, I tend to use little cards that look like this. So these are cards that you can use, and this really forces you to summarize and make your answers shorter. You could, even if you're really clever, you could put them behind your laptop, behind the camera. I always have stuff written on the wall that I like to look at each day. That's something really useful. And another thing that you can use, which is super clever, is an auto cue. I'm going to show this to you now. If you just go and type in auto cue, you can find this, which is a free cue prompter. And what you can do is that you can type or paste your script in here, start the prompter, and it will just read this out to you while you're talking. You can make it go slower or faster. So that's cueprompter.com, and you could read out in front of you. What I would say is, if you're going to use a prompter because you're really nervous about reading out your script, definitely practice with this. It does take a little bit of getting used to. So those are a couple of little tricks that you can use. How much practice? 3 to 6 times for each question. Little and often is enough. What I mean by that is you probably don't want to get caught in practicing for 3 hours in a row. You just want to find some time. So if you've got your questions on cue cards in your pocket, then you could find the time to do it when you have a break at work. So every other hour, you could just take it out. You can set some alarms on your phone, do 10, 15 minutes of practice, and then go on about your day. Little and often is generally much better, because you'll find that it's going to be doable. If you're trying to do a lot all the time, or say a whole afternoon of practice, you're just going to get so tired and so jaded, you're not going to want to do it anymore. And that is the end of that. So that's everything that we had to say about interview practice. You can get all of these notes from the slideshow, and also you can find a lot more information about writing your scripts and having sample answers that you can refer to in the 28 most common interview questions answered book, which is included in the course. Hey, what's up, guys? So I wanted to talk about 500 successful clients and the 7 things that they did that I feel really differentiates them from anybody else. And this really kind of comes from habits. So what I've tried to do over time is to create a system where success is inevitable. The more that you observe people trying to get a certain result, the more that you notice a pattern namely being something that is repeated over and over again, because these patterns create a system where essentially when you notice these patterns, these things that are happening, then you would realize that if somebody does A, B, C, then they will get D result. And this system can then be created with habits, i.e. instead of a random pattern, the system can then be created with habits or regular actions. So what is a habit? A habit is something that we do on a regular basis. The more we do it, the less we have to think about it, because the action just becomes something that we do. So brushing your teeth is a habit, washing yourself is a habit, eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner is a habit. It's just something that we do. It's something that we repeat. It is actions that just become ingrained in who we are. We don't have to think about brushing our teeth. We just do it. It's time to go to bed. I'm going to brush my teeth. Just woken up. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm dirty. I'm going to wash myself. Yeah. So why are habits important? Well, there's a brilliant quote, which I really love, which is sow a thought and you reap an act. Sow an act and you reap a habit. Sow a habit and you reap a character. Sow a character and you reap a destiny. Many people have the same goals. So when you think about it, when people talk about goal setting, it's not particularly relevant. Why? Because many people have the same goals, but not all those people will reach those goals. Because what separates the majority who don't achieve their goals and the minority that do is habits or their repeated actions. And I'll give you an example of this. There are good habits and there are bad habits. What's the difference? Well, it's pretty simple. A good habit takes us closer to our goal. Bad habits take us further away. For example, if I want to lose weight, but I keep eating chocolate late at night, this is a bad habit because it's taking me further away from my goal of losing weight. So how can we think a little bit more about creating good habits and breaking bad habits? I highly recommend that you read James Clear's Atomic Habits. It's a brilliant book. It's not particularly long. It's less than 200 pages. If you want to, then you can read it and see it kind of broken down in a little bit more detail online at jamesclear.com. This is a subject I'm passionate about, and he covers it in masterful detail, really much better than I could. And a lot of what I'm saying is a distillation of what he has said in his book. So there are 7 things successful international students do, because if you want to get a job in the UK as an international student, you will need certain habits. These actions will massively increase your chances of success. And I've observed the same habits from clients since 2013. If a client is doing these 7 things, I can pretty much be 100% certain they will find a job in the UK. And I've seen that repeated over hundreds of different clients. Habit number 1, apply early. Why? Well, when a company starts advertising a graduate program, they have, say, 100 vacancies. Every day people apply, and more apply as time goes on because more people find out about it. When a job is first advertised, maybe 100 people know, and then probably that number will go up by some sort of scale, and then it hits jobs platforms and so on and so forth. At the same time, more jobs are getting filled. So this means there are more people applying for less jobs. If you wait until the deadline, then you will then, in all likelihood, be one of thousands of people applying for the few jobs that are left. Applying early is one of the best ways to increase your success rate. But how can we do this? What actions can we take? What habits can we form to make this applicable? Well, first of all, make an application plan before you start applying. This is something we covered in great detail on another one of the modules. Do your research and set a schedule, which is one of the other habits that we'll talk about. Identify your key target companies and begin to get ready for online tests, because you know that they're going to come after applications. I recommend 1 test a day. You can do less, you can do more, but that seems to be a good number. Identify your areas of weakness and start to work on them. If your spoken English is poor, then you know that you need to start to work on that. Try to consistently look for new opportunities each week that you can apply for early, i.e. jobs that are less than 7 days old, and schedule that in, because the sooner that you apply once a job has been opened, the more likely it is that you're going to be successful. Habit number 2, speak. The better that you can communicate, the more likely you are going to get a job. Before, when students used to try and ask me what it is, how I can help you, and I say, we help you to tailor your skills and experiences for the job that is required through how you communicate. Interviews and assessment centers require good spoken English, confidence with strangers, the ability to present yourself, knowing how to answer interview style questions. So how can we habitualize this? Make time once a week to engage with English speakers. This could be societies, Toastmasters, meetups. And within that is implied that you must make yourself uncomfortable. A lot of people will speak to me and they say, well, I don't really enjoy doing this, or I don't want to do that. It makes me uncomfortable. That's the point. You don't make yourself uncomfortable, then you cannot grow. Write and polish your personal introduction, something that we have covered in this course, and prepare to answer and practice the 28 most common interview questions. Again, something that we've covered in this course. Habit number 3, schedule. We all have busy lives, and I find in my experience, what doesn't get scheduled doesn't get done. To choose times and days when you will dedicate yourself to finding a job. Finding a job is hard and often boring. Therefore, if you don't commit a set amount of time, you will end up applying when all the jobs are gone, or you just won't end up doing it at all because it's not fun. depending upon your frame of mind. It's not easy and it's not fun, which is why it's very easy for us to look at stuff on our phone. It's very easy for us to watch Netflix because it's fun. If something's hard and boring, unless we schedule it, we're not going to do it. And I recommend that you set aside the smallest amount of time that you could easily do each day or week, and then increase from there. A common mistake that a lot of people make, this is really common in weight loss, is that people will say, well, I'm going to go from eating 2,500 calories a day to 1,000 calories a day, and I'm going to go to the gym every single day. Of course, it comes as no surprise that the vast majority of people after a week or 2 weeks are unable to stick with this, and therefore end up going back to what they were doing and probably eat more and exercise less. How can we do this? Number one, the simplest way, just use a calendar or a diary. This could be on the paper or phone. Set aside time for key areas of practice. There are 4 of them: looking for vacancies, sending application, practicing online tests, and practicing for interviews. Decide how much time you can give, and also decide what is going to be your reward and breaks for completion. So this is certainly not an endeavor that I would recommend that you would do 7 days a week. This is something that I would say that you want to be doing on a basis where you feel like you're being rewarded for what you're getting. And it has to be an external reward, something that you do because you may not get the reward from, getting interviews. This is a systematic process which is going to involve some type of failure. Habit number 4, quality over quantity. Sending lots of job applications does not mean a higher chance of getting a job. This is a common fallacy or false belief that people hold, as if all your job applications are rubbish, then none win. It doesn't matter how many you send. So do not mistake busyness for achievement. A lot of students do this. They say, I sent 40 job applications today. My response to that is, but how many of them were good? It is better if you can send 2 to 4 quality applications a week than 20 to 40 quick applications using one-click apply on LinkedIn Indeed. It's also better for your self-esteem as well. No one likes endless rejection or a lack of responses. How can we do this? This all goes back to your application plan. Use it, set targets each week, and do less applications as well. What's the minimum amount of applications that you can do each week, which is reasonable? If it's 1, great, do that. If it's 2, fantastic, do that. But set a minimum amount rather than a maximum amount. That's much more likely that you will be able to continue this process over time. Habit number 5, practice. So a lot of things related to getting a job are new. Writing cover letters, writing essay style application answers, taking online tests, doing interviews, speaking in front of people and solving problems at assessment centers. To be good at something new, you need to first be bad. Practice means you're bad when it doesn't matter by yourself, so that you can be bad when it does matter, when you're being assessed. So how do we do this? Schedule time for practice. 1 online test a day, your personal introduction when you can, speaking English to strangers, practicing your interview answers, doing case studies and presentation. And most importantly, make your practice as real as you can. So speak your interview answers like you're answering it in real life to a video camera without a script and a set amount of time. Practice online tests using an online test provider. Do your personal introduction in 2 minutes or less. The more realistic it is, the better it is. Habit number 6, accept. If you know something is hard, you can accept that work will be required. Going to the local newsagents does not require the same work as running a marathon. You accept it's a marathon and not a sprint when you think about getting a job in the UK. You then work backwards from your target and see what you can do each day to get even 0.0001% closer. Every action, every habit is just taking you closer to your goal. How? Again, plan and schedule effectively. Habitualize your weekly practice. You prioritize finding a job over other things. So it maybe you'd say, well, I'm a member of 3 different societies and I want to do different volunteering and I want to get a first in my bachelor's degree. Do you need those things? Is it required for you to get a job? Because if it's not, then maybe you don't need to prioritize it. And remove what does not help you reach your goal. Habit number 7, persist. Failure is inevitable and rejection is recommended. Success goes to those who fail the most. Our heroes are those who failed more than anyone else. This is ultimately what made them successful. Beware burnout. Burnout is a really common thing. If you find that it's getting harder and harder for you to apply and do things, then perhaps you need a break or you need a reward. Accept rejection and stick to the plan whether times be good or bad, which is why scheduling and practice is so important. And internalize that success belongs to those who just never gave up. Cool. So assessment centers are quite a big topic to kind of chunk down in an hour, but I'm going to sort of try and make the best of it. I broke this up into 5 parts, which is who gets there, what are they, what happens, what exercises, and 17 tips to get better. I thought that was the most effective way to do it. I'm going to dig into a little bit in the exercises and give you some specifics, as well as some handouts, which will kind of help you to break that down. The 17 tips to get better, I also give the link. This was a YouTube video I made like maybe 6 months ago or something like that. It's actually getting a lot more views now, sort of because, well, when I looked on YouTube about assessment centers, I found all the videos were just awful or really so vague that they just were not helpful. Who gets there? This is a kind of an interesting thing to think about. There are no stats on this because it varies by industry. I'm sure this is lower for banking and it might be higher for sales and business development, but I would say optimistically 5%. So you've kind of got the stages that you're looking at would be like 1, application, CV, and I tend to lump in online tests and online tests, and then interviews, and then AC/final interview. They tend to be bound up. Sometimes a final interview will be pushed for. It's quite rare these days. Companies prefer super days. They used to be used a lot in Asia because there's such a high volume of candidates. So 5%. If you had 100 candidates, you lose most people online tests, application and CV screening, and then you lose 75% there straight off the bat. And then I'd say you lose another 80% of those that remain, and maybe you're left with 5. An interesting thing to kind of, I'll cover that in the 17 tips actually, not to cover that here. What are they? It's pretty simple, right? An assessment center is you get a group of people together, generally 4 to 6. It rarely will go over that. I read through some stuff today and people are like, there could be 15 people there. No, that might be an assessment center for a spring week or an internship where it's all just kind of icebreakers, friendly group exercise, like how to build the best Lego castle or something like that. If we're talking about a graduate or professional level assessment center, you won't get more than 6 people. Kind of spend half a day going through stuff, doing different things. I'll kind of outline a standard structure. These are sort of things as I see them in terms of my experience. So I broke these down into like very likely, likely, and unlikely, which is a distinction which is rarely made in most generalized articles. They're like, you could be asked to do one of these 12 things. I'm like, well, yeah, but what's more likely and what's less likely? Group exercises, very likely. Individual written tests, likely. By written tests, these are basically written exercises based off of a business problem, rather than like, I don't know, analyzing the works of Shakespeare or based off of or like true, false, couldn't say statements. Like when people say written tests, they think of verbal reasoning. It's not that. Role plays, really unlikely. Not a lot of companies do role plays because they're really time. They're they're really time intensive. The last big company I could think of, and they haven't done it for years, is KPMG used to do it. And it was really pretty cool, but it involved like they would get in professional actors, they'd have a whole day. And, unless it's sales or business development, then they might do some sort of like salesy role play. I would almost kind of banded that in with like individual exercises related to the role. So develop a piece of code like pairs coding, coding under time, mocking out a brief. But that kind of comes with the territory. As ever, when you're trying to talk about things in a general way, people be like, oh, but what if I'm applying to be an astronaut? And I'm like, dude, go and do your homework. I don't know. Like, I can't speak about all things for all jobs and all industries. That's just ludicrous. Presentations, likely. In my mind, you're reasonably likely to get these. Aptitude and personality tests, which is basically online tests, likely. This is why you don't want to pay someone else to do your tests, because there's a good chance banks do this a lot. They retest because they know that a student might get someone else to do it. So you don't want to turn up, and I've had it with clients before, where actually it's come out that they've bombed at the assessment centre on online tests because they paid someone else to do it. Don't do that. It's just silly. Apart from just the sense of integrity that compromises, it's just like you might get tested again and you're going to get caught with your pants down. And interviews are very likely. So, and I will kind of delve into the very likelies. Apart from individual exercises, I'm more going to sort of talk about written exercises, because this is really useful for informing our practice. So if we are outlining a skill that we want to improve, say, for example, you wanted to be really good. I use a lot of sports analogies. Say, for example, you wanted to be a really good triple jumper, which is like a hop, skip, and a jump. It's very similar to a long jump. You would then break down that skill into individual sub skills or techniques. So you'd have the sprint, the hop, the skip, and then the jump. Just in the same way with an assessment center, you don't want to be practicing for 9 different variables, when realistically, thinking about something like Pareto's law, or the 80-20 rule, the 80-20 rule being that 80% of it, 20% of efforts contributes to 80% of results. And that's trackable and statistically significant across many different areas of our life. Then what you want to do is you want to concentrate your efforts on the 20% that is likely to yield the 80% of results. That really underlines pretty much everything that we do at Job Ready English. We really just concentrate on the things that are most likely to happen, and then we deal with other things as and when they occur. So what would happen in an assessment center? This is a standard structure, which I kind of liked. It came off a website somewhere. You would arrive, you get your little name badge, you want to arrive. If anybody's sitting there going, what should I wear? Exactly the same thing that you wear to work. So sometimes, recently I had a client go to a Big 4 assessment center, and he was like, yeah, but they do smart casual, man. And I'm like, that's cool, but you're here for a job interview, so I want you in a suit. Because first impressions matter, and anybody who believes that that's not the case is just delusional. If you're smart, people notice. And if you're not smart, people may want notice, but they certainly won't notice you. That's my experience. So a suit is just another kind of simple mechanism or tactic that you can use to be noticed. I guess it's an alternative form of peacocking. And it's even better now because people don't want to be smart. They want to be smart casual. They want to have their own unique identity. And yet you will find everybody always relates to Steve Jobs. So we're like, well, Steve Jobs didn't wear a suit. And I was like, I'm pretty sure Steve Jobs is okay, but you're not Steve Jobs. So instead of looking at him, when you really reach his stature, then by all means wear your turtleneck. But until then, if you're just making your way into the game, into the maze of life, then abide by simple rules that will help you. Introduction to the day, the company and people running the assessment center. This tends to be like a little sales pitch if you're there face to face. So I would say it's about 50-50 these days for face to face and online. For face to face and online. It used to be much heavier on online because of COVID. There was a time it was 100% online. They don't do it so much anymore because logistically it's a bit of a nightmare. The basic reason being is on Zoom, only one person can talk at any given time. That's not so cool when it comes to an assessment center and a group discussion, because you might find that there's that one guy or that one lady who just doesn't shut up, and it's impossible to get them to stop talking unless somebody mutes them. So, and I've had clients go to assessment centers where the assessor has literally muted someone and gone, please stop talking so that someone else can talk. So a lot of companies are going back to face just because it gives everyone a bit of a fairer shout. Icebreakers, maybe, maybe not, depends on the size of the group. If you're going to a smallish company and there might be 12, 18, or some sort of element, some kind of divisible number by 6, based on groups. So 3, 4, 5 groups, they might do icebreakers. They'll probably be the icebreakers as a group. You know, who are you and what's your favorite animal? What ice cream do you like? And so on and so forth. You tend to have 2 to 3 exercises. I tend to see 3 exercises. This is really, an assessment center is an all-day gig. So expect to get there at 9 and leave at 4. One of the exercises may not be assessed. Like one exercise could be meet recent graduates. An exercise could be speak to the staff or interact with our videos or something like that. But generally 3 exercises about right. Break, lunch, something that people ask me is be like, oh, is everything assessed? And I actually talk about this in the 17 tips. No, everything is not assessed, but you are always being observed. So just assume that. And finally, you might have closing comments or end of the day, and then they'll get back to you. I'd say standard sort of time to hear is like a week to 10 days. You know, sort of 7 to 10 days to get the results back, because by that time, they kind of know who they want and who they don't want. So that's kind of your basic-ish structure to look for. And also just understanding this is an all-day gig. Something I'll say on a side note, if you've never done an assessment center, it will wipe you out. You'll find yourself feeling really drained. So if you're like, oh, I'm going to go and do an assessment center, and then I'm going to go here and go there, and expect yourself to feel really quite tired, because it's a lot being observed for a whole day and being tested amongst strangers can be really exhausting. So just bear that in mind. You might want to give yourself a bit of a softer day afterwards just to recover. A lot of people are really surprised how draining they find it. So what exercises, and I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail, and I want to go through specifically group discussion and written exercises. Number 1, do your research. So use Glassdoor. We've already spoken about it. It tends to be a little bit more difficult to find people who are even willing to talk about their assessment centers. Why? Because it's competition, and also people have already gotten a job. So they tend to be much less compliant to help others when they've already got their result. People operate in self-interest. But you know, you could go to Glassdoor, Student Room, Wikijob. If you look back long enough, you'll probably find somebody talking about an assessment center. I would expect, if I was just to prepare someone blind, I would expect a group exercise, an individual exercise, probably a case study, and an interview. Just based upon my experience, I tend to prepare people for that. The problem then arises from the group exercise because most people are alone. So you're like, well, where do I find 5 random people to practice a group exercise with? Your first port of call, which may serve you or may not serve you, is your university's career service. Some will do it, most won't. Some will kind of get a company in, some companies will come in. If you ever on your schedule see XYZ companies coming in to hold a mock assessment center, go and experience that, because there is nothing quite like realistic practice and experience. Don't just dismiss it because, oh, well, I'm not going to work at that company, or I don't even care about AI for cats. Just doesn't matter. If you have the opportunity to practice, take it. It's just gold. It is worth its weight in gold. Because the fact of the matter is, if you turned up to a strange situation, but you've already experienced it once, you have a massive advantage over your competitors. If you've done that 5 times, 10 times, then you're literally a shoe-in to win. Just because they could be smarter than you, more talented than you, more hardworking than you, but they're just not as experienced as you. So you are really losing a golden opportunity if you don't do that. If the career sales is like, not really, or they only give you one shot, I would concentrate on practicing case studies and presentations. That's what we do with our clients. It's as simple as that. So when somebody is preparing with an assessment center, we will give them, so we have a large custom bank of material for different companies, case types, lengths, difficulties, and we will just get them to rinse and repeat. Perfect practice makes perfect, and make it real. What does it mean? Assessment centers are timed. So if you have a case study to do, then you should do that case study in a timed environment, probably no longer than half an hour. If you want to make it harder, give yourself less time. Don't give yourself harder material, just give yourself less time. Because a key skill in assessment centers is to be able to process information very quickly and solve problems. If I was to kind of break it down, and then with the added additional third element of, and be able to communicate either in a presentation or with your peers in a strange environment. But if you can process information quickly and provide solutions, you will win. The only people who lose are those who cannot communicate. Record and review yourself. So if you're doing presentations, and I'm going to go through quickly like group discussions, written exercises, and a presentation template, just to give you an idea. It's surprising how many people don't really know how to present stuff. Just do the reps. So this is something that's come up really throughout everything that we've covered during the course. If you want to get better, just do more. That's it. I want to be better at online tests, do more. I want to be better at cover letters, do more. I want to be better at interviews, do more practice. That's the unsexy answer. You know, rule of thumb, if you do 5 to 10 case studies and presentation, you'll be golden. You shouldn't really have any problems at all, because your competitors will probably have done none, or they will have basically just have been looking stuff up on Google and Glassdoor. They will have read a lot of stuff, but they won't have done a lot of stuff. And here's a couple of links. Probably my favorite out of this is, oh, that's interesting. I'll have to put the hyperlinks for these. So MIT Sloan School of Management. Is this not working? Oh, this internet is driving me mental today. Oh, great, thanks. They should have. Here we go. I think this is it. Yep. Yeah, so they have MIT have got these super cool case studies. Here we go. So this is one. These are reasonably difficult. You know, and you can read through and you may say, you know, what are the problems? You could do an analysis of the company. You might have to think a little bit about what the questions might be, but basically all case studies that you will come across are essentially going to be, here's a business, it has a problem, what's the solution? Here's a product, it has a problem, what is the solution? Here is X, what is the problem, what is the solution? And the solution may be open-ended, what do you think it is? Or it may be closed. Do you want to choose option A, B, or C? That's pretty much it. And the same goes for group discussions. They are fairly, it is just company X has Y problem, which solution is best? That pretty much summarizes what you're going to come across. Of course, that's non-technically specific. So I'm not talking about pairs coding or something to do with maybe front office banking, but I would say as a generality for most scenarios, that's pretty much what you're going to come across. So practicing the case studies is a really good way to do this. Let's just talk a little bit about the different types of exercises and some of the nuances with it. So group discussions. What is this all about? You know, basically talking and solving problems with strangers in a short time. You'll be given a group, you'll be part of a group of 4 to 6 candidates and be given material to read and then discuss. The material is generally based around a generic business problem like X company has Y problem. What do you think is the best solution from A, B, or C, and why? So just some key elements for success. I'm not going to go through the whole handout, but I want to cover a couple of things. A lot of students are fearful of group discussions because it's weird, and also they tend to be by nature a little bit introverted. COVID has definitely made introversion and social anxiety worse because people just haven't really spent a lot of time around other people. They're good with phones, they're good with technology, they're really bad at small talk. So here's some like things to be mindful of. Remember people's names. A great book by Dale Carnegie called How to Win Friends and Influence People says the sweetest word in any language is your name. So if you can remember someone's name, all the better. People will have name tags, but they'll probably lose them throughout the day. So if you can just like have a little notebook with you, I would, and you can just write stuff down. Speak enough to be heard and contribute to the group. In a group discussion, if you don't speak, you fail. So if you're worried about speaking, you just need to think, well, what are you worried about more, speaking or failing? Be mindful of the time. So everything really revolves around the clock. So if you have, there will be a minority of people who talk too much, talk less, and the majority of people who talk too little, talk more. Use the material to speak in a compelling way. What I mean by that is, if you want to be compelling to your audience, then refer to stuff that's in the material rather than just your opinion. On page 8, we'll see that in this table, this keyword, this particular statistic, this item, give it context, also makes you more believable, more powerful, more influential. Much like when somebody quotes a scientific study, it could be complete and utter horseshit. But people generally go, well, statistically speaking, the FDA has said, and you're like, oh, do they? It takes, you know, a little bit of time to go, wait, what? Where did you get that number? Like, is that even true? Where's your quote your source? But how many times do we actually get people to quote sources? We just take them at face value. Don't be afraid to interrupt others or offer opposing opinions. Something I always say to my clients when they go is I say, look, we're here to win. Like, this isn't about getting crumbs off someone else's cake. Like, if you imagine the assessment center is all about who can get a bigger slice of cake, me. I will take your cake and everybody else's because I'm here to win. Everything that has led you to this point, not just the process, like to come to the UK, to study a degree, to go through all the struggles at home, everything, whether you're a home student or an international student, it doesn't matter. This has been years in the making. You've been in a formal education system since you're 5 years old. So it's literally been 15 years, right, to this point. And on the day, you're like, Oh, but I don't want to be rude and interrupt people. If I could, I would jump over the table, put my hand over your mouth, and speak over you if that was socially acceptable, because I want to win. Like, this isn't about going somewhere and making friends or not being, obviously, there's not being rude, but don't be afraid to interrupt someone. Be like, sorry, I realize that you've made your point, but all of us need to have a contribution to this. Cut across them. Do not be afraid, because don't look at it as being rude. Look at it as someone taking away your victory, and it will be a very different perspective on that. Always be moving towards solving the problem. So if you see deviation from others or for yourself, then just think, look, how can, there are 3 questions we need to answer. We've got X amount of minutes to answer each of these questions. Let's go. We need to get moving. Try to listen attentively to others. What a lot of people tend to do in assessment centers, and I outline this in the video, is they either don't speak, look at their notes, or don't stop talking. Because for like 5 years, I had to sit there and train clients face to face for assessment centers. So I would sit there, I'd have a group in the morning, a group in the afternoon. I did that 1 day a week. And I did that for, yeah, so what is that, 250, maybe 500 groups, 500 assessment centers that I moderated and observed and saw people doing. Wow, that's quite a lot. Anywho, the point of that is that some people will just sit there and say nothing. Some people will sit there and make loads of notes, like the notes matter, because these are all avoidant behaviors but because they're too scared of talking. And some people won't stop talking. Take the time to just listen to what other people have to say so that you can speak. Because if you're not listening and watching other people, you're going to miss your opportunity to talk. Do not deviate from that point. That's really important. Ask questions and join group members who are less active. A group discussion is about operating as a group. If you find that you are leading that group or dominating the group, then you say, hey, Steve, what do you think? Hey, Mark, I've got any ideas? Do you agree? Is that a fair assessment? Is that a good idea? What do you guys think? Does that make sense? You can just ask open-ended questions. Very frequently, when I have one-to-one sessions with people, I ask a lot of questions. It's really just to gauge participation. So one of the things that I often say is that okay? Does that make sense? Do you have any questions? Have you got anything you want to say? Because the brain becomes less active if it's not being engaged with, and humans have quite a short attention span. It's really difficult to maintain someone's attention for longer than 20 minutes. So by asking questions, you keep somebody engaged. Recall key points from the material and take them into account. You know, if there's figures to work out the figures. If you do, you will take notes when you read the material. Then just make sure your notes are easy for you to talk about and read from your notes. So you'd be quite surprised about how many people make the basic mistake of making notes, which they then can't read, and then they don't know what to say. Demonstrate good interpersonal skills. So really just being positive. If you're not talking, doesn't mean you can't participate. You can nod, you can agree, you can verbalize, you can use your hands, you can be looking at other people, you can be an active participant in that conversation. You're not going to be able to speak all the time, and that's okay, but you should look like you're interested and engaged. Why? Because if you can't hold your interest and engagement for half an hour during an assessment center exercise, how are you going to maintain concentration 9 to 5, 5 days a week? They're looking for someone who can persuade and influence others. What does that mean? Is that I can present information that will influence you to agree with me. Now, you don't have to be a particularly good communicator, but you do have to communicate information that is persuasive. And of course, just an obvious one, appear neat and have proper attire as befits a business meeting. Wear a suit. For ladies, if you're watching this, I tend to suggest wearing flats because you walk around a lot and you don't want to be uncomfortable. Having just basic and being comfortable. Be smart, but be comfortable. Often, you know, I've had young women go to assessment centers in like high heels, a really tight pencil skirt, blouse. I don't have an opinion on fashion. God, I don't know anything about fashion. But what I do say is, look, if you're if you're operating on the day and you're having to go through a lot of anxiety and pressure and stress, you want to be comfortable because you've got enough problems to contend with. So that's the basics for that. But a link for this handout is included in the course. There's some other stuff to go through, but I'm quite mindful of time. So I'm really just covering elements that I believe, rather than me talking about the method that you can just read. I want to talk about elements where my input is helpful to just gain some more understanding around these basic points. A written exercise. So a written exercise is basically just a standard test. You're given a case study and you're asked to provide an answer. Some important things to think about with a written exercise. If you're not very quick at reading English, then maybe it's something to work on. So generally written exercises are much shorter than they used to be. So what I've seen over the last 8-9 years is that you used to get written exercises which were 10, 15 pages long. And now it's more like 3 to 5. So it's not so daunting. Roughly time management wise, you want to spend 1/3 of your time reading and 2/3 of your time writing. Because if you find you spend too much time reading, you won't finish. And if you don't finish, you don't pass. So I always like to offer that constraint straight away and say, look, it doesn't matter how good your half an exercise was, because if you couldn't finish, then you won't pass. In terms of thinking, this is a cheat sheet. So a way to answer written exercises, business reports, just generally write up answers to stuff like this. I always say use bullet points. I like them because it forces you just to put 1 point per bullet. Always use data where you can. Data, keywords, page references. The reason being is it's a business report. It's not an opinion piece. So people will say, TikTok is a really big company. And I say, how big? They're like, TikTok, last year, TikTok earned $6 billion in revenue. Oh, that's big. But we use data. We didn't use our opinion. Me saying TikTok is big is my opinion. Me offering data makes that opinion grounded in some form of context and fact. You only give your opinion for the conclusion. So a written report, a business report is really, can I summarize and present the information simply and in a way which is understandable, and then infer a judgment and come to a conclusion at the end of that. So here's a basic structure: title, what is the report about, name, subheading 1, so you'd have an aim, like what question will you answer, why are you writing this report, subheading 2, which is company or subject, what are you talking about, and what is the supporting data. So very often what people will do is they'll just randomly start writing an answer on a piece of paper like it's a school report. But ultimately, I should be able to pick up your business report as a standalone piece of information and read the aim and the conclusion and get it. It's kind of like doing a dissertation or an essay at university. You have to explain stuff. So if you're doing a business report about the problems that Netflix is having, you would have to explain what Netflix is. And even though that seems really silly, you just assume that people don't know. I always say use the grandma test or the 5-year-old test. So the grandma test is explaining stuff to Nana on the phone. And the 5-year-old test, which I find is probably a little bit simplistic, but it's just, can you explain this to a 5-year-old so that they would understand? Even better, can you explain it to a 5-year-old so they would understand and they can then explain it to another 5-year-old? That's pretty cool. And then you would answer each question, which tends to be around some options, same format. Company X has Y problem. Here's A, B, or C solution. Which one do you think is best? Then you summarize your key points, balance your choices, and state your solution and findings. The last thing I'd say about that is if you choose from multiple options, you should clearly state why you have chosen A rather than B or C. So I choose A because. I didn't choose B because, I didn't choose C because. It might be a nothing statement. It might be like, oh, B just is in financial distress, or C has had some bad press around its CEO. That's fine, but give me a reason. Don't just say I choose A. The last thing I just wanted to break down just as a template are presentations. So something as well that's quite common is you could get a case study and be asked to provide a written exercise, or you could get given a case study and then be asked to present on that case study. So this is a really cool template that I use in one of the lessons that I teach for our premium clients. And it's just about how to give presentations. And it blows my mind that people don't know this. Like, it's not taught at university. I've got no idea why. So when you're writing this out, the first thing you want to do is just write a 15-word summary of what you want to say. It's really cool because it helps you to stay focused on what you're trying to do. So this is a presentation about the problems that Netflix are having and the free solutions that it could choose to help it. I don't know if that was 15 words, but it was about that. So it helps us to keep really grounded around the central concept, the one big idea, beginning 10% of the time that you have. So if you've got 10 minutes, then your beginning should be a minute where you introduce your subject and then you just give your 15-word summary of what you're going to say. The middle is the majority, 75%. You know, outline the problem. So what is the problem? So Netflix currently is seeing a reduction in subscribers. Set the context. Through COVID, Netflix did really well, and now there are lots of competitors like Disney Plus and Amazon Prime and Hulu, and they're eating into their market share because they have unique offerings that Netflix doesn't own. And then you present the different sections. So that could be the different questions that you have to answer. It could be the different solutions that are being presented, whatever that is. But you map out 75% of your time. Why is it useful to set constraints for time? Because then you know how long you've got to speak about stuff. A common question that comes up is say like, oh, how long should I talk about this? Or how long should I write about that? Well, it's simple. How long have you got? I've got a minute. Then you can only talk about two things. A good idea to think about with presentations, which even simplifies the method even more, is one thing per minute. So I tend to find I've listened to a lot of presentations, and good presentations really deal with that most one thing a minute. If you try and deal with more, it just sort of breaks apart or feels incomplete or rushed. In the end, 15%, summarize the solution, say why you chose A and why you didn't choose B and B, and then thank audience and invite questions. So yeah, just some points to remember. Finish under time if you can. So if you've got 10 minutes to make a presentation, you should really be done in 9. People are rarely offended if you come in under time, and often offended if I said that you had 10 minutes and then you take 15. I just feel like you lack the basic humility or ability to take on basic instructions. I can remember not that long ago facilitating a talk and saying to the guy who was doing the talk, you've got 20 minutes to talk, you'll be given a 5-minute prompt to finish. He went on for like 28 minutes and people were really quite upset because they just was like, and he just didn't understand. And I was like, look, you had 20 minutes, you knew that. So, oh, I had a lot to say. I was like, well, then say less. You had 20 minutes. No more than one point a section a minute. 2 important sort of ideas to think about: simple over complete. You're never going to be able to include everything. And confident over technical. So a lot of people will want to get really detailed and be quite technical about stuff, but actually just being confident wins. The amount of times that I've seen confident people talk, and then only afterwards someone will go like, wait, was that real? Is that actually right? You can bowl people over with confidence and just be talking utter bullshit. And we've all seen it, right? And then that's the process to follow through. I'm just mindful of the time, so let's press on. Yeah, so here are a couple of places that you can refer to get your case studies. I just want to finish off with like 17 tips or just little ideas that are useful to know. Number 1, you're already good enough to do the job if you get to an assessment center. Done. Everyone is as nervous as you. That's something that people tend to forget a lot. Train hard to compete easy. The more that you practice, the more time that you put in with the stuff that I've outlined about the exercises, the better it's going to be. If you don't practice, then you're just as untrained as anybody else. Everyone can pass, or everyone can fail. Often people go there with this kind of false idea that only one of us will pass. That's not true, because you don't know how many people are going through that process, how many people made it there, and how many spaces there are to be filled. Talk and listen. A lot of people struggle with both. So even people who don't talk a lot will really struggle to listen. They'll be too busy thinking about themselves or thinking about what they should say. Number 6, pay attention. And what I mean by that is pay attention to the material when you read it. What is this question asked? Pay attention to people when they're talking. What are they really saying? Pay attention to what they're missing. Pay attention to people's mannerisms. Each of these attention will yield results, because you will be able to make a greater level of distinction when you are observing your opponent. Yeah. Instead of just being off for the fairies, or like, oh, I can't wait to get out of here because I'm really tired. Prepare questions beforehand. So if you're going to sit for an interview, I haven't covered the interview because really the basics of that are essentially covered in earlier modules when I went through the interview success seekers masterclass. There's not a lot of deviation apart from maybe asking some questions. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Slow is smooth is fast. Interesting. So slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That's a good old saying from Bruce Lee, I think. And it relates for me when I think about martial arts and the practice of that. So what do we mean by this? Talk slowly, practice slowly, do things slowly and with intent, and you will become very fast in actually a short space of time. Everything is not assessed, but you're already being observed. Chunk down the timings. We've explained that in the written exercises, in the presentations, the case studies. If you've got half an hour to do something, then think about what's my how much time do I, and I have 5 things, then do I have 6 minutes per thing? Is one thing much more time consuming than these other things? Because though somebody may start well, disorganized, they won't finish well. It will be chaotic. And in that chaos comes opportunity for you. Be likable, happy, and approachable on the day. No one likes someone who's miserable or can't be bothered to talk to anyone. Just remember, you might all be sitting in the foyer and you might think, oh, it's my competition. I'm really nervous. I don't want to talk to anyone. But the chances are the person who's the happiest, the brightest, just is making an effort, you're more likely to talk to them. If they're in their group, you're more likely to respond to them. And actually, they are already building a competitive advantage over you. Don't be the timekeeper, be useful to the team. I put this in the video because it seemed like all the videos on YouTube were like, you should be the timekeeper. And my response to that is, who gives a shit what the time is? Yeah, that's useful, but really give content, give advice, give something that's tangible. Like, you're not a clock. Like, by all means, keep an eye on the time, but don't just be a timekeeper. The advice is not very useful. Use data material when you speak. Don't just jibber jabber. So a lot of people jibber jabber. They don't really have very much to say, so they talk a lot. Avoid that. Talk less, but talk with intent. Lead, follow, get out of the way. If you're the leader in a group, great. If you're not, then follow the leader. Don't spend a lot of time. Guys particularly tend to do this. We call this willy wagging. They'll get really like, I'm the leader, I'm the alpha dog. And it's just like, no, you're not. So get on with it and move on. Enjoy it and treat it like a test run. This is true for interviews as well. The more emphasis and expectation that you put on it, the more difficult you're going to find it, because you're actually going to spend most of your day not thinking like, how can I enjoy this? How can I make it fun? How can I be better? You're just going to spend most of your day thinking, how can I not fail? And by thinking of this failure, you probably will do that. And just remember, there'll always be another chance. Don't go in there and think it's your last chance. If you haven't done an assessment center before, the chances are you may not pass. And that's understandable. Just like the first time that you rode a bike or drove a car or spoke a different language, everyone has to start somewhere, and everyone starts bad, despite what people would like to say or put on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. Like, everyone starts off bad. So don't worry. Like there will always be another chance.